JPR. And then I believe we'll be going to 361. And then we'll go consecutively after that. Let me make sure we have a quorum. We're going to wait about 30 more seconds. But I can start to go through the rules of the road, if you will. First of all, welcome to the Education, Health, Environmental Affairs Committee for afternoon sessions. I'll remove the halo I had from my backlight. We have, I think, 9 or 10 bills today. Each bill will begin with the sponsor, the senator's sponsor. They will be followed by a list of proponents. The first one has up to 5 minutes to speak. Subsequently, it is up to 2.5 minutes. And then we will take questions, and then we'll go to the opponents and take questions. I will sometimes announce if there's no opposition to the bill, which might encourage you to tailor your comments and consider the side of brevity. I believe we have a quorum. So welcome, Chairman Smith. And we're going to 598. He will be followed by Stephen Principe. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Senator Smith here to present Senate Bill 598. Good afternoon to everyone. So this bill, the idea for this bill came to me back in 2017 when I met Mr. Principe, actually at the direction of our late Senate President, Senator Miller, because he had a constituent that was a veteran and a small business owner. And he was alarmed and alerted the then Senate President Miller to the fact that in the state of Maryland, we weren't meeting some of our procurement goals with respect to veteran-owned businesses. And so after that conversation, I met with Delegate Young. We put in a bill that would basically establish a work group to develop recommendations to see how we could meet our goals and exceed our goals with respect to procurement and doing state business with our veteran small-owned businesses throughout the state. A little bit of background. Nationally, about 6.8 of employer businesses in the United States are majority owned by veterans. On average, a veteran-owned business has about $2.4 million in annual sales and employs about 11 people. 58% of veteran business owners are 65 years or older, and 46% of veteran business owners have been in business for 16 years or longer. So a vital part of our economy. Here in Maryland, about 10%, a little bit more than 10% of Maryland businesses are majority owned by veterans. And the Maryland Department of Commerce offers no interest loans up to $50,000 for qualifying veteran small business owners. So there's a little bit of assistance here, even though we're not meeting our procurement goals. So the problem, as it stands, veterans are not included in the Governor's Office of Small Minority Women Business Affairs. So opportunities for veterans to open their SBEs aren't accessible, even though there's a clear demand for them in the marketplace. Since 2010, designated departments have been required to spend at least 1% of their procurement contracts with these veteran businesses. And it's sad to say that they've struggled to meet this goal as they've only met it twice in 2018 and 2019. So 33 of those agencies failed to meet the 1% procurement and participation goal in 2018. So Human Services had 0.08, IT Services, Information Technology had 0.38, Maryland Department of Veterans Affairs had 0.87, State Highway Administration 0.01%, and I could go on. So very simply, what the bill does is it includes veteran-owned small businesses into the pre-existing definition of small businesses and specifies that these businesses are for-profit. It requires the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs to include these veteran businesses in the Small Business Reserve Program. And then it changes that statutory requirement for procuring for that 1% procurement and bases it on, it just leaves it to basically relegates that responsibility to the respective agency. It requires the Governor's Office of Small Minority Business Affairs to establish an advisory committee on veteran-owned small businesses. and then it lays out the framework and the membership and the leadership of that committee. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the committee for a favorable report, and I'll yield to my panel and take questions. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Senator, can you wait a couple minutes so we can hear from Mr. Principe and then open it up for questions for both of you?
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then Stephen Principe, SMI Companies, please, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Stephen Principe. I'm a proud veteran of the United States Air Force, small business owner, and a lifelong Marylander. I'm here to support SB 598 because the VSB program has the potential to better serve the veteran-owned small business community. Unfortunately, the VSB program that was enacted over a decade ago, and yet most of the state agencies still fail to meet their goals. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I started getting involved with actually President Mike and then, of course, Senator Smith, which have been fantastic. Over the last summer and fall, I was privileged to have spent many hours with the VSB work group, working through the problems and reasons why the program wasn't succeeding. Everything from lack of participation, lack of marketing, and the lack of program oversight in large. This Senate bill that has been put together is the culmination of these efforts that we all work very hard on. And it reflects the ideas, compromises, and aspirations of the regulatory agencies and the community stakeholders. This bill would immediately improve the program. Better than that, though, is the bill will allow the program to grow organically and provide the regulations and structure to continue to nurture the program, to benefit the VSB community and all those who serve and have served. And that's a kind of synopsis of what we did and went through, but that is, I hope that we can get this pushed through. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Principe. Can I ask, is Frank any relation to you?
That's my younger brother.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
he's been very well known here in Annapolis.
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. You know, I've got 9 other brothers and sisters, but Frankie is he's a great guy, very much so. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions for the sponsor or the witness? I have Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll be very brief. First, I want to thank Chair Smith for introducing this legislation. It was one of the very first issues I worked on when I was a new delegate back in 2015 to go from 0.5% to 1%, even though we were trying to go even higher than that. And I think this is the better approach. My question for both the chair and for our business owner that testified is, I'm still finding some challenges that our veteran-owned businesses either don't know how to go about doing business with the state, or maybe because of these barriers have not pursued these state contracts. Could either one of you comment on that? And do you think this will make dramatic improvement? I'm really trying to go after those veteran-owned businesses that simply haven't even applied to go after state contracts.
Well, Mr. Principe, I would defer to you since you're in the shoe, you're walking a mile in those shoes. So,
yeah, I believe it will vastly improve, especially with it being incorporated into EMA, which will help out, and getting out as much as we can once we get this through, trying to market. We have a list of thousands of veteran-owned businesses within the state of Maryland. I foresee us actually marketing out to them to say, hey, listen, we've changed some of this. Now there's more opportunity. And there just hasn't really been. And of course, all us veterans were, every race, creed, color, gender, you name it. And so I think it's very important to get that out to everyone to say, hey, we've made some changes here. We're really looking to get, more input, more work for the veteran businesses. And I think it would be much appreciated. I think there has been kind of a stigma. I do also do some work in like Virginia, the state of Virginia. Virginia recognizes veteran-owned businesses at full force, which is a great thing. But here in the state of Maryland, my home state, and where I have a lot of employees that live in the state of Maryland. We work all through the state of Maryland. And, I think this will actually be a great push and a great feather in everybody's cap to get people involved and to help out and to reach out to the other veteran businesses to let them know that we are Maryland open for business.
Thank you. Senator Ellis, please.
Thank you, Chairman Pinsky, and thank you, Chairman Smith, for bringing this bill that touches so many part of our state. And Mr. Prinsky, thank you for your participation in this, and thank you for your service as a fellow Air Force veteran. I just want to say I support you fully. Could you summarize in business for a few years, what are some of the difficulties you or other veterans have faced in trying to connect with the state to even fulfill that 1% goal, that modest, meager 1% goal?
Yeah, yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing that. The 1% goal, if you break it down in numbers, I mean, on most contracts is so negligible that I think that even looking at going in for, if it's one, the whole project is $100,000 and basically 1%, I mean, it really doesn't leave a lot of meat on the bone, if you want to call it that, for people to actually take the steps. And then, of course, going through the process. Most veteran-owned businesses, such as myself, we've already been certified through the federal government. I am an official, CVE certified veteran-owned small business. There's a lot of disabled veteran-owned small businesses also that tie into all of us. And we went through the 2-year process of getting our certification with the federal government. And actually, there's a lot of, of course, there's a lot of federal funds tied into the different states. And like my biggest niche is I do environmental work, mostly with state, private developments, state highway. But it's just been very tough to try to get any type of, and honestly, myself personally, I'm not looking for a set aside. I was just looking to be able to get into some of these projects through, some type of minority participation with being a veteran business. And, it's been tough. And a lot of times the percentage is so, like you said, negligible that it's sometimes very hard to say, hey, we're really going to look to do some veteran, business within the state of Maryland. I guess. Yeah. Does that explain anything?
It does. It does. And, my experience a lot of times is people say, hey, thank you for your service. Comes
Right.
time to helping veterans. It's like, this roadblock comes. They almost believe that saying thank you for your service is good enough. And so I look forward to working with you and Chairman Smith to do more for veterans who are in business. Thank you for your answer, sir.
Thank you, Senator Ellis.
Thank you. Senator Washington.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill. I won't say thank you for your service, but I will say thank you for your service always. But I do want to understand, you mentioned bias, because all of these are, sort of founded, the certification and the, not set aside, but making an accommodation because that there is bias and there's discrimination. So we have discrimination against women, in the world. And so we have a women, we have that, women businesses have a disproportionate impact. They have problems getting loans, et cetera. Same with minority businesses. Can you share with the committee what are some of the biases or things you hinted at it, but what are the problems that businesses that veterans have, if you don't belong to any other, minority group or discriminated group?
I'm sorry if I led to bias. I don't know if I wanted to say it was bias. Yes, there are, of course, issues within certain, groups. I totally believe that and totally understand where you're coming from. As for the veteran side of it, there is, like I said, a veteran can be, a male, a female, white, black, Hispanic. As for, I don't think I'm not talking as a white male having, bias. I'm just talking on the veteran. I think that us as veterans, we've served our country. We've sacrificed a lot of things. And like I said, on the veteran-owned small business side of it through the federal government, I just felt as though that the state of Maryland, compared to some of the other states, really didn't have any programs to help on the business end of it, or with, some type of incentive for the veteran businessman to be able to get involved in state funded projects. So
Yeah, no, I agree that it's in the state interest to make sure that our businesses owned by veterans get business from the state. So, but
Yes,
I'm just trying to, there's a parallel, it's being amended to this part of the code. And I just want to understand, because I'm open to the fact that there might be, and I just wanted to know if there were specific challenges that veterans experience in employment and all that. So just thank you, Chairman. If you could follow up with me, I truly want to understand it, because there had to have
yes,
been
ma'am.
a disparity study to set it up, and I'd like to understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the hearing on Chairman Smith's bill. We're going to go to Senator Lamb 380. It's only 2 witnesses, and then we'll go to Senator Kagan. Senator Lamb 380, Maryland Office of the Inspector General for General Services. Well, there's only 1 witness. We can't have Senator Lamb talk twice unless he's asked questions. Senator Lamb, please.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. And Lamar, if you can bring up the slides for this, and in the meantime, I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Clarence Lamb, Senator District 12, here to speak in support of SB 380, which aims to establish an independent office of the Inspector General for the Department of General Services. This is a cross-filed bill with support from my colleagues in the House. Delegate Barron and I serve on the Joint Committee on Fair Practices and State Personnel Oversight, and then also with Delegate Krim, who's working on it there too. She and I chair the Joint Committee on Audits and Evaluation. So this incorporates a variety of elements that are considered government best practices, so to speak, as it relates to the oversight of state agency operations and procurement. Next slide. For a bit of background, DGS, as many of you are aware, is the primary state procurement agency responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars in procurement and management of millions of square feet of facilities. They're responsible for coordinating facility improvement projects, leasing property for state agencies, and staffing the Capitol Police here. Considering the vast responsibilities tasked to this department, what this bill intends to achieve is a codification of an independent accountability entity that ensures appropriate safeguards and transparency measures to be in place to help protect the interests of taxpayer-funded state activities. Next slide, please. The vast responsibilities of DGS do, in my opinion, warrant dedicated oversight to avoid fraud, waste, and abuse. And while the Office of Legislative Audits, which reports back to the Joint Audits Committee, does an exceptional job with their periodic audits, OLA is unable to provide the level of day-to-day oversight warranted by a state agency that's often tasked with such extensive responsibilities as DGS. Additionally, the Office of Inspector General will be able to assist legislative audit in ensuring that their audit recommendations are fully implemented. OLA has commented in several instances about how helpful it is to be able to work with the Office of the Inspector General in MDH and the Department of Health. Next slide. So what this bill does is establish an Office of Inspector General for DGS. And while it would be independent, the bill proposes that this office be housed physically within DGS and that 6 positions be authorized to help staff its establishment. The director of the office would be appointed with unanimous consent from the governor, the state treasurer, and the attorney general, and would be tasked with the role of coordinating investigations into waste, fraud, and abuse within DGS. The office will have subpoena power in addition to the authority to seek sworn testimony and refer entities to refer non-compliant entities to the circuit court. And OIG will have additional roles in collaborative efforts with other state oversight entities that investigate crossover issues at DGS as well. The bill also contains other typical kind of good government provisions, so to speak, including a clause for the just cause termination of the director and inability for the director to accept or pursue elected office while serving as the Inspector General and for the 3 years following their term, as well as mandated reporting requirements to the governor and to the appropriate General Assembly committees. Next slide. We've seen further cause for the establishment of an independent Office of Inspector General within the Department of General Services as a result of some of the recent procurement activities during the pandemic. And this is, not to take away from the ongoing work DGS has continued to work on, but the recent procurement during the pandemic has highlighted a need for better oversight and helps ensure that the legislature codifies safeguards for public resources. So in crafting this, my colleagues in the House have collaborated with legislative audits and DLS and has met with DGS on several occasions to seek their input on the proposed implementation of an independent Office of Inspector General. The fiscal note, we think is a bit high. It might give some pause, but it's been brought to our office's attention that there exists a position vacancy rate within DGS of about 8 to 11% on an annual basis. So this vacancy rate comprises about 40 to 70 positions depending on the year. And I believe that the 6 pins requested in order to stand up this office would be a reasonable first step towards securing much needed oversight operations for a state agency that obviously has some tremendous procurement authority. This bill is also an extension of the work of that this committee has already done towards the establishment of the independent Office of the Inspector General in the Department of Health. DGS made a recommendation to my office that the committee consider a statewide Office of the Inspector General instead of doing multiple department level OIGs. I'm open to having that conversation with the committee, but I think that creating an Office of Inspector General for DGS is a good first step. I urge the committee to consider a favorable report for this bill, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. I don't see any questions. Do I have one? Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Senator Lamb, for presenting the bill. And I just was waiting if there was anybody else to testify. I just wanted to go through the fiscal impact of establishing the office.
Sure.
You're aware of the letter that the Department of General Services sent on the fiscal impact?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I think, so they do have unfilled positions. They have pins that are available within DGS to be able to allocate for this. And, I think the other concern that I have is that the number of procurements that they're putting out, and I think we've seen that over the, last year, particularly with emergency procurements, means that there is high potential for the need for accountability here, and obviously understand, the outlay required to actually stand up the office. But I think at the end of the day, there'll be significant cost savings generated for the state as well if we can have better oversight over these types of procurements.
I just wanted to just make sure that on the record that since that DJS was pointing out that it was a cost of $607,903 in FY22 and rising to $851,423 in FY26. So I know that we're all sensitive to any bills with fiscal impacts. So I just wanted to be on the record with that. Thank you, Senator Lamb.
Sure,
Yeah,
and you know, the department goes through hundreds of millions of dollars of contracts each year, and so I think even a small percentage of savings, I think, would pay for itself with you know, this type of oversight.
Thank you. Senator Katie Freyhester.
I was just, thank you, Senator Lamb, for bringing this bill forward. I was just curious about the relationship between this and kind of the previous issues that we just heard discussed. Would the Office of Inspector General have anything to do with the procurement from small and minority-owned businesses?
Well, I think they would, to the extent that they're there to really provide that level of accountability and oversight, and then report back to the General Assembly on performance. And so if there are standards that are set up by the General Assembly to meet certain minority-owned businesses or MBE standards, you know, I think the OIG's office can look into that within that department and be able to report back on, you know, where the department is and being able to meet those standards. Ideally, they would be in compliance. But if they're not, you know, I think these types of audits would be important to be able to set benchmarks as to how departments can come into compliance with laws that we pass.
And I should have said minority, women, and veteran-owned businesses. Thank you very much, Senator Lamb.
Sure, thank you.
Further questions? Further questions? There are no other witnesses, so that will complete the legislation 380 from Senator Lamb. We're going to move on to Senator Kagan. Senator Kagan, Madam Vice Chair, which of the two?
Mr. Chairman, if we could start with Senate Bill 658, because my lead proponent is on vacation.
Okay, then we're moving to Senate Bill 658, Department of Emergency Management, Establishment and Transfer of 911, known to some as 116.
That's right.
Upside down.
A bit of an inside joke. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We will have the sponsor followed by Mr. Brooks.
Yep.
Then Kevin Canale, Jack Markey, and then Richard Lichtenstein. Hold on. There's no one signed up in opposition. Senator Kagan, you're on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I think you all know that this is one of my favorite masks, one of my most important commitments, legislative and policy commitments. But this morning, Chief Brooks, I put it on this way. So my chairman accused me of being the queen of 116 for the moment. For the record, Mr. Chairman and colleagues, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. And truly one of the greatest experiences and honors of my life is to be the chair of the Next Generation 911 Commission. I've been working on 911 issues for 6 years, inspired by 3 people who have died in my district, including Carl Henn. And I know that many of you have heard me talk about these issues to death, but some people might be watching for the first time. So I'm going to ask for a bit of indulgence. For the last 3 years, we have worked on everything from cybersecurity to funding and oversight, technology, staffing, recruitment, retention, and many, many more issues. Each of the last 3 years, we have released a report, an annual report, and each of you senators were sent by me a copy of this year's report with our recommendations. This year, I think 65 pages or something and 22 recommendations. This bill reflects one of the recommendations. It has been 3 years that we've been working on this issue, and I will just give you just a super brief background, which is currently the 911 Board, formerly known as the ENSB, the Emergency Number Systems Board, which helps fund and oversee all 24 of our county's 911 centers, where calls or texts now are received, where police, fire, and paramedics are dispatched, and where our lives and properties are protected. Currently, that board is housed under the Department of Public Safety and Corrections. So as I say, that they are under the jurisdiction with the prison guards, which has never made any sense. MEMA, the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, has been housed under the military department. Similarly, just never made sense. So it took 3 years and statewide surveys and trying to figure out where the 911 board should go. And we looked at putting it under the Department of the Maryland State Police. We looked at whether it should be an independent agency reporting directly to the governor. We looked at all other agencies. We did a survey of what other states have done. And ultimately, this bill won unanimous recommendation and endorsement by the commission. And I'm so proud to have Chief Richard Brooks, who just retired from Cecil County, Cecil County's 911 Center. And Senator Gallion and I went up there and toured that together. And then Jack Markey in Frederick County, who does an extraordinary job up there, and which has been at the forefront and pilot project of text to 911. And then our wonderful friend and partner, Kevin Canale from the Maryland Association of Counties. Speaking of partners, our good friend and colleague, Senator Ed Riley, and new Senator Michael Jackson have all been on this commission for the 3 years of our work, along with Delegate Sue Krebs, who's been a great partner as well. So what are the reasons that we think this is important? So first off, since the pandemic, since the coronavirus pandemic started, MEMA has been reporting on virtually a daily basis directly to the governor. There's not some chain of operation and up through a bureaucracy. Everyone understands that our emergency management needs direct reporting to the governor, and that is what has been happening. So shifting MEMA to an independent agency, as this committee has heard before a few weeks ago, directly to the governor, is common sense. More and more states have done and are doing exactly that. The key component of this bill, and what was not in the bill that we previously heard, is that it would then take the 911 board and shift it to being under MEMA and being able to have all of the benefits with no change in its autonomy. And that's really important. MEMA would not change how money comes in, would have no access to any of the funds, would not change the disbursement or oversight in any way. What MEMA would be able to do, and I have already talked to Director Strickland, who has been a wonderful ally and guide in this whole conversation. They are willing to provide better HR support. One of the real challenges in our 911 centers is recruitment, retention, and training of the women and men, the courageous women and men under the headsets. When they get sick, when they're out, when they leave their jobs due to stress, we can't save lives and property. And so how to better do outreach, how to better do training, and how to get them to stay in their jobs after they're trained. HR is critical, and MEMA has indicated their willingness to help. The Department of Public Safety and Corrections has been a good landlord in many, many ways, and nothing about my statement or this legislation should be seen as disparaging that excellent department or their leadership, but it wasn't really the right home for the 911 board. The website was often neglected. It was a year or more out of date until I flagged it. Again, MEMA is committed to helping with website portals and better infrastructure. So those are kind of the overviews. To give you an idea briefly of the other states that have already done this, 14 states have housed it now with their emergency management, red, blue, big, small, Arkansas, Connecticut, Georgia, Idaho, Iowa, Louisiana, Mississippi, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Washington, and West Virginia. And 8 others work with their emergency folks, and that's California, Delaware, Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, New York, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. This just makes so much more sense. And with that, I really want to turn it over to my wonderful colleagues, all of whom have served on this commission with Senator Riley, Senator Jackson, Delegate Krebs, and me. And I'm especially grateful to Chief Brooks, for checking in while he's on vacation, came in off the beach to join us. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd love to hand it over to Chief Brooks. Thank you, colleagues. Happy to take any questions after we're done.
All right, I'm ready to go.
Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, Senators. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. This is really a testimony to the length of tentacles that the senator from Rockville, Gaithersburg has to drag me in and make sure I'm here. Just so you know, there was a negotiation. I was not allowed to do this on the beach, and I was required to wear a collared shirt. So I accomplished both of those goals at the request of Madam Vice Chair. I have to tell you, and I think it's appropriate, I miss being in Annapolis with all of you working on these issues. You know, Zoom does a great thing in keeping us connected, but my goodness, the face-to-face contact and just the simple handshakes is something that's absent from our society now, that's going to take a while to recover. So I do this with some thrill, and what I'm going to do is take you on a little trip with emergency management. And there are only a few of you who have the tenure in life to appreciate some of these things. And that's the fact that when we talk about emergency management, we are talking about the modernization of what was civil defense. And when I say you're tenured in life, perhaps you remember when there was a time that you held air raid drills in your classroom, or sirens blew at 1 o'clock on Mondays. Those are the things that took place in the same era where retired soldiers and retired officers were our emergency managers. And in the basements of what was called bomb shelters, they inventoried canned water and crackers and candy that were the carbohydrates designed to sustain a population who came to shelter in a bomb shelter in the event that some foreign country started to pound us. We've matured from that. The Emergency Management Agency in Maryland, the MEMA, the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, is a frontline, first-class organization that should be a direct reach from the right hand of the governor. When the governor declares a state of emergency, it falls right on the desk of the emergency managers in the 24 jurisdictions, and there's no question. That should come directly and not through the military department. Think of it this way. When the governor activates the National Guard and they're going to be assigned to us for assistance in snowstorms and disasters or blizzards, they come to us, to the emergency managers, and we assign them out and manage them. That's backwards. It's not supposed to work that way. So when we look at those things and we're looking for that clear chain of command and that path, if that governor says this is a state of emergency, the director of MEMA needs to be right here and then dictating down to the 24 of us what we should be doing. We then have to shift gears. My goodness, look at where we've been in just the past couple of years. We have a declaration of emergency on the drug opioid crisis, fentanyl crisis. We have a declaration of emergency on COVID. It landed on the emergency manager's desk first. And he coordinated with the health officer, he or she coordinated with the health officer to get things going and spin things up. Today, I hate to say this, but I think you're all getting snow and ice. And the emergency manager, and the emergency managers have already consulted via Zoom to coordinate the efforts and have firsthand information on where the storm's coming. Okay, we've got these professionals who are managing COVID and drugs and now a snowstorm. What's next? And it doesn't matter. What's coming next, they will shift gears, reallocate resources, and make it work. So professionally, they're in a position to do that. If we take then, and just to highlight Senator Kagan's comments, we look at the Maryland 911 board, right? Seated in a place where there's no connection to 911, right? The jails, the penitentiaries, that's a great organization. But the 911 board, many of us in our positions were not only the directors of emergency management, but we were also the 911 directors as well. It's an appropriate fit. That's about half of us. So we look forward to you taking the opportunity after you spent the last 3 years approving the re-up or the modernization of the 911 system in next gen, making this move so that we then have an appropriate flow of information and leadership in our emergency organizations. So with that, I know I'm coming up on 5 minutes. It's a pleasure to be with all of you, and I look forward to my colleagues supporting these comments. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief
Sure.
Brooks. Thank you for stepping in. So next up is Jack Markey. Mr. Markey, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, Chairman Pinsky, and Senators for allowing me to share a few thoughts this afternoon. My name is Jack Markey. I'm the Director of Emergency Management for Frederick County, have been for the last 17 years, and I also have the privilege of being a member of the Maryland 911 Board, formerly the Emergency Number Systems Board, since 2008. So as Chief Brooks laid out for you, my world for the last 17 years has been at the intersection of 911 and emergency management as Chief Brooks and many of my peers. So my comments today echo and support the Vice Chair, proponent of our bill, our tireless Senator Kagan and Chief Brooks. 911 and emergency management share a multi-jurisdictional and multi-organizational focus. 911 does it in seconds and minutes. Emergency management does it over days, weeks, and months of focused effort to make sure that we're ready to respond when a COVID emergency occurs, when a hurricane threatens, or as Chief Brooks mentioned, a winter storm is bearing down upon us. 911 is better when emergency management is tightly integrated with it. There is no agency in the state government that interacts in the public safety arena with the sole focus of making local jurisdictions better prepared, better linked to the federal government, better linked to the state agencies than MEMA, establishing that function as an independent agency as it is in many, the majority of our local jurisdictions reports directly to the senior elected official of the county or Baltimore City. Doing that at the state level is the right choice, and I strongly support that move.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Great to have you here, and thank you for your service. Kevin Kennelly, Maryland Association of Counties.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Kevin Kennelly here in support of Senate Bill 658. I cannot come close to the prior panelists in explaining, taking you on the tour of the EM role in Maryland. They did a fantastic job. I'll just say, as a cabinet level entity, we think that MEMA would be in a really strong position to work directly with our county emergency managers to develop scalable, flexible, and adaptable concepts that better align with key roles and responsibilities when disasters strike. This partnership, we think, will ensure continuity of government in the face of, an innumerable number of catastrophic events. And when it comes to the 911 board, it's a vital part of our state's emergency response and disaster preparedness network. MEMA is the proper entity to help advance the deployment of that statewide next-gen 911 system that we've talked about over the past few years, while also ensuring that the board retains its autonomy in terms of authority, enforcement, structure, training, and funding, including the management of grants for counties. So that's important to us. And we all know COVID-19 has underscored the importance of a strong, well-defined, and seamless intergovernmental emergency management system. And so the necessary preparedness, mitigation, and recovery efforts must also be rigorous and coordinated. So with that, echoing my previous panelists' comments, I think that this is a great bill. It would strengthen and streamline collaboration in planning, response, and recovery efforts, and we would urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 658.
Thank you, Mr. Kennelly. There is no opposition. There is a favorable with amendment, and then we will take questions. Richard Lichtenstein, welcome.
Thank you. Honorable Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak in support of Senate Bill 658 with amendment on behalf of the American Academy of Pediatrics. The American Academy of Pediatrics, it consists of more than 1,000 pediatricians in the state whose mission is to advocate and promote the health and safety of all children we serve. I'm a practicing pediatric emergency medicine physician in the throes of the COVID pandemic. I'm all too aware of the widespread impact disasters have on children and their families. In addition to specialized medical and life-threatening conditions such as the multi-system inflammatory system, this disaster is woven in all regards of the cloth of a child's life. Issues such as isolation, lack of family, friends, losses. Everyone is affected, especially those with developmental or chronic medical and mental health conditions are the most vulnerable. In addition, the pediatricians who've been trusted providers for their care or have difficulty in reopening practices to deliver vaccines, comprehensive care, but this must be done in consideration for safety and adequate PPE for providers when it is done. I'm very, think that SB 658, for all of the reasons mentioned, is a strong bill that establishes this important independent department whose purpose is emergency management, and this transfer of the 911 board is likewise important. Emergency management is a broad term which includes a wide range of activities, issues, planning, frameworks, and response constructs. It's a critical component of the state's ability to assure a vibrant, strong, and responsive framework for responding to emergencies, whether they be triggered by weather, as we're going to see soon, health, violence, or other contributing factors that require a coordinated and effective response. While strengthening and prioritizing emergency management through the creation of a department is a step in the right direction, if anything, I've seen this current pandemic that's demonstrated to me is that a responsive strategy is not ideal to children in disasters who would be better served with a proactive approach as it relates to all aspects of pediatric disaster preparedness, planning, program development initiatives with pediatric experts in disaster response and emergency management already at the table, providing expert evidence-based recommendations for children. My experience in disaster preparedness shows that there are gaps in the planning framework of a pediatric component in disasters, unless the drills are already focused on children at the onset. This pandemic has demonstrated that we don't always know the effects of a disaster on children, but we always need to be prepared. The Maryland chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics would request that Senate Bill 658 be amended to include a specific directive for the creation of a program for pediatric disaster preparedness and emergency management within the department. This objective could be done through an amendment that creates the Office of Pediatric Emergency Management within the department. And it could be a directive that the newly created department work with relevant stakeholders to study the creation of a pediatric emergency office or division within the department with an obligation to report.
Thank you so much.
Recommendations.
Thank
The bill
you
would
for
make
your-
it even stronger and responsive to this vulnerable population. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for being with us today. We have questions from, let's see, we had Senator Hester, you're good? Okay, we have Senator Ellis followed by Senator Carozza. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair Kagan, for this bill and for your hard work in the 911 arena. I look to you for your leadership and thank you for bringing a great improvement to the citizens of Maryland. So I really mean that sincerely. And thank you for the witnesses for your work also in this area. I really appreciate it, and our citizens do. I have, I'm listening to the testimony and I think back to my Air Force days as an Air Force officer. You know, it's like every time we got a new commander, we had reorganizations, right? I mean, just people moving around, new titles. And so I want you to kind of dissuade me as to if this is not just moving people around. I'm not really, I need to be convinced that this will really help out in emergency management, because right now things are happening, emergency management is through the military department. And so there we have the National Guard, and they respond to a lot of our emergencies, they supplement. So that's what National Guard do, including January 6th insurrection. They're doing vaccinations, they're doing so many things in emergency management. Bad snowstorm, the guard is out there. Even when my SUV can't pick up folks from home to take them to the hospital, workers and stuff like that. If it snows too high, the National Guard comes out. And so thing is, I haven't heard why I'll put it this way, why moving things around can make things better. Could someone articulate that to me? And if you did already, I apologize for it not sticking in my brain.
I think it's a great question, Senator Ellis. Jack, do you want to speak to that from being day to day?
I'll start, but I'm sure my colleague, Mr. Brooks, can help me out as well. I think the fundamental difference is the Maryland National Guard is an excellent force provider, but doesn't have the day-to-day integration with local government that the Maryland Emergency Management Agency that exists under the National Guard provides. So I would see the change as being beneficial. And I lived through this experience in 2007, organizing our emergency management and 911 functions out from within our fire department. The fire department are perfectly well mission-focused individuals, but that ability for emergency management and 911 to exist to serve the senior elected official, the governor at the state level, and the county executive in my example, let me do multi-agency work and call on those resource providers like the Maryland National Guard, like other resources to focus on behalf of that executive. I know in the past that conversation about the fact that the MEMA director works for the adjutant general until an emergency occurs, and then when an emergency occurs, the adjutant general works for the director of emergency management on behalf of the governor, has always been an interesting difference in how that leadership occurs. And I think this reorganization would provide that clarity. And as Mr. Brooks pointed out, in an emergency, the governor has that emergency management director at his right hand today. It should be that way every day, and we should strengthen those bonds with the local organizations for emergency management and 911. So, Mr. Brooks.
So I'll follow up with that.
Brooks, anything you want to add, or are we good? I'm conscious of the fact that there's not opposition, and so just because it's my bill, I still don't want to take a ton of my colleagues' time, but we do want to answer.
Yeah.
Brooks?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to kind of follow up with that, because this is an important, very important topic. And so have there been any failures in response to any emergency in the current structure? I mean, this is not about disparaging anyone, but we need to understand what we're doing when we vote, and I take my vote seriously. And so I really need to understand if there are any failures. If you need to reach me offline, that's fine, say that. But I really need to understand this issue, that we're not just shuffling jobs and moving people around. Because federally, FEMA is in the Department of Homeland Security, Federal Emergency Management Agency. They're not a separate cabinet agency. And so I really have not cemented in my brain why this current system does not work, and why will we spend extra money to rearrange things and take things away from a department that, have a lot of these folks who are there under the same roof to work with each other in case of emergency, as currently is. So that's my concern. And so I just want you to respond to that if you can.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. Chief Brooks, do you want to add something? And you and I also talk. I did give a couple of examples, but I'm happy to give you more, and Chief Brooks can do that now too. Yes,
ma'am. Thank you. Senator Ellis, from your professional background, I think your question is well justified. And I would just put it in the context that in my comments, I said we brought civil defense out of the basement. We brought it to a professional era. And specifically, I go back to the last three directors of MEMA who brought this into being. And significantly now we have a director who has established resiliency into, the priority of the agency, because that's what cures the jurisdictions in the long run, if you will. The National Guard are soldiers. They're soldiers, they're airmen. They are definite professionals in their job. They're not emergency managers. We are a very broad group of people that can shift gears very easily. I would say that that's not the role of the National Guard. They don't shift gears because they are that structured, and nor should they to do that. So if you look at it in that context, perhaps that gives you some light on this. It's a modernization of an agency.
Yeah, I understand that. One more question. So the National Guard, they're there in the military department, but the National Guard, they're not the emergency managers. The emergency managers are there in the military department. So you have the emergency managers and you have the National Guard, right? So they're side by side with so under the current structure, you're saying the National Guard are the emergency managers?
The emergency management agency reports to the TAC.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Ellis.
Appreciate that. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Senator Carozza, followed by Senator Hester.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and I want to thank you for your work and the committee that you worked with. Just as way of background, I'm going to follow a little bit of Senator Ellis's point, since there's also additional background that I think should be out there. So when we're talking, I'm looking at this bill, it seems to me it does two things. It elevates MEMA to a department level, and then at the same time, then you transfer the Maryland 911 board to MEMA, to this new department. So I'm trying to figure out, first of all, if that's if what you're really trying to accomplish is this transition on transferring the Maryland 911 board, and the only way you can do it is to elevate MEMA as a department. And the reason I want to kind of make sure we're separating out what we're trying to accomplish is, as way of background, this is a major, reorganization when we talk about kind of these issues with emergency managers. And I have the utmost respect with them. I've been working with them since my days working as a deputy chief of staff with Governor Ehrlich. And we did some restructuring when he came in after the terrorist attack on September 11th. Maryland really didn't have anything in place when it came to Homeland Security. So we started looking at what that would look like, putting different, having a governor's office of Homeland Security, a director, how that person interacts with both the head of the military department, the head of MEMA, and all these questions about whether MEMA should be independent from the military department. So there is a history on this. So when I see a bill like this, I'm looking at it from the standpoint, we know there's history on it. We know this seems to be driven. This to me looks like it's being driven on transferring the Maryland 911 board and how you do that. So I guess my question is, I'm trying to understand exactly what we're trying to accomplish organizationally wise and with the 911 board, and to ask if we involve the governor's Homeland Security director and the TAG and the MEMA director as we kind of work through this, given the history of these reorganizations in the past.
Thank you for the question, Senator Carozza, and I'll start, and then if any of my witnesses want to chime in. First off, you got it exactly right. This bill does do two things. It proposes to move MEMA from under the military department, where it really doesn't fit, to become an independent agency as it is in now most other states. And second, it moves the 911 board, formerly the Emergency Number Systems Board, from under with the prison guards from Public Safety and Corrections, where it doesn't belong, and moves that as an autonomous agency, but within the purview of MEMA. And so it's a win-win. Both of them will be in better places. To be clear, the 911 Commission has no interest in taking the 911 board out from Public Safety and Corrections to move it under MEMA if MEMA is going to stay in the military department. It's a twofer. It has to be both. Moving it from one bureaucracy where it doesn't fit to another bureaucracy where it doesn't fit made no sense to my commissioners. So it really is both. It's moving MEMA for all the reasons of moving MEMA, and then moving the 911 board for much better sort of customer service, much more alignment in mission, easier collaboration, less bureaucracy, better support. The examples that I gave was everything from HR, recruitment and training, and to website management. There's
But just to further
Same language,
clarify, Madam Vice Chair, and I understand that was very clear, but just to further clarify, there's nothing to prohibit in law that you could transfer the 911 board to MEMA. In other words, MEMA doesn't necessarily have to be a department in order for it to be transferred. Is that correct?
The commission would withdraw its support, I would venture to say. They were really clear. They wanted to be autonomous. They wanted to find the right home, and taking them from one home that's not the right place to another home that's not the right place made no sense. That's why it's taken us 3 years to get this recommendation before you.
Well, you're saying it's only the right place because it's not elevated to a department is what I think I'm hearing.
No, it's not elevating to a department. We are not proposing that the 911 board be a department, that it be under the MEMA
Right.
department, but would still stay the same level, the same everything that it is now, and stay autonomous. No, with the funding.
But there is nothing in law that would prevent 911 board to be transferred to MEMA. It doesn't have to be elevated to a department in order to do that transfer. I mean, there's nothing in law that would prohibit that. Is that correct?
I think that a transfer of a department would need to be legislated. So I'm not sure that that's accurate, but I can't to that with certainty.
We'll talk offline. Thank
We
you.
can talk offline. Jack, Chief, anything you want to add? Kevin? Or are we good? Next question, Senator Hester, followed by Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I'd also like to commend your leadership in the 911 area. My question is about, as the good senator just pointed out, there's 2 parts to this bill. And my question is a couple parts. But first, if this comes out of a recommendation of the 911 Commission, but it's my assumption that there's many other reasons why elevating MEMA to the level of a department is good. And 2 that I could think up off the top of my head are, 1, having the new secretary have a seat at the table when the budget's being addressed could be incredibly important. And the second thing is around resilience. We've got all kinds of resilience. We've got grid resiliency. Look at what's happening in Texas. We've got cybersecurity prevention. We've got flooding prevention. I'm wondering if anybody could just comment on the role that MEMA plays in resilience.
So let me say, colleagues, that Director Strickland is on the phone with my Chief of Staff. He signed up providing expert witness testimony, but that was not able to fit in the box of favorable with amendment, or unfavorable. And so committee was not able to give him the link. So I'm afraid that he's unavailable. And so I don't have anything more from him. But I think all the examples that you gave, Senator Hester, are spot on. Resilience, budgeting, direct access, which is efficiency. And because, just remember, colleagues, we're talking about emergencies. We don't want to have lots of bureaucracy and paperwork and, and 12 different forms to fill out before, MEMA or another emergency entity can take action. Chief, Jack, Kevin, anything? Yes, Chief Brooks.
Sorry, I couldn't get to Senator Carrozza. One of the things that we haven't mentioned yet, and I think it's important for Senator Carrozza to hear from us, is that one of the key issues here is the transparency and accountability for the tremendous increase in funding that we have had. And the reason that's important is because we then have it in an agency that is connected to emergency services. It's not connected to us, with all those funds going into public safety and corrections. So I think there's some merit there to appreciate what the move is for. I do not agree that the bill is being driven by the placement of the 911 board. Right? At least not to me, it's not. Because as Senator Hester said, governor, and how that can happen. I think I'm unstable here, so I'll pause.
We might have called you unstable before, Chief Brooks, but now we have evidence. Just so you know, I love my chief here. So Senator Gallion, he is your chief, your longtime chief. Please take the next question.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. It's great to see you, Chief Brooks. I know you've moved a little farther to the north, but we'll miss you in District 35. But we look forward to staying in touch. Real quick question, Madam Vice Chair. I just want to try to square this with Senate Bill 68 that Senator Lamb had introduced. So my understanding is his bill also raises MEMA up to like a cabinet level departmental position, correct?
Correct.
So I guess that's something we'll figure out in the voting session, how we work between the two bills that are his also would rename the department. But is that your intention to kind of try to work between the two to come up with one good product here?
So I think it'll be the will of the committee as to how we navigate that. But the commission had a two-step recommendation, and this does both steps, not just move MEMA, but then move the 911 board. And as I said, we've been working on this for 3 years and finally got to this place. So hopefully,
okay, and I don't want to confuse
the way
it,
clear to going to both.
Senator Lamb, I'm supportive of his bill as well. So I just want to, I guess when these come up, we'll have a good discussion on that. But I just want to be clear for the rest of the committee members, if this kind of sounds familiar, we have kind of heard some of this, with Senate Bill 68.
Definitely. Thank you, Senator Gallion. And that's in my testimony. And so I really want to thank Senator Lamb for also, caring about this and sponsoring legislation on this. So Senator Carozza, followed by Senator Ellis.
I'll be brief.
We have a voting session and we have a lot more bills. So
I'll be brief. Because I went back. I did ask a question. I want to just say, it sounded like from the response when I asked who had been involved with the commission and you in coming up with, the legislation, particularly elevating MEMA to the department. If it sounded like the current MEMA director has been involved, but were there any conversations with the governor's advisor, Department of Homeland Security, and with the Maryland Military Department?
So I can tell you that I spoke to a number of key people in the governor's office. I'm not going to start naming names publicly, but I did run this idea past them, and we did talk to DPSCS, Department of Public Safety and Corrections, and just to make sure that no one's feathers were going to be ruffled. I think that Jack Markey is head of the, Jack, what's the name of your committee? But some of the work that he does and Chief Brooks, they might have had other conversations. And then Director Strickland has certainly been in conversations, as have Clay Stamp from Talbot County. And Jack, is there anything you want to add specifically, folks you've engaged with on this issue?
Yeah, I would say I'm privileged to have succeeded Mr. Brooks as the president of the Maryland Association of Counties Emergency Managers affiliate, which is the 26 governor-appointed emergency managers in each of the jurisdictions, including Ocean City and Annapolis as the state capital. So we have had a continuing set of conversations and engagements around how do we make emergency management most effective in Maryland. As each of the jurisdictions has a governor-appointed emergency manager, we share a responsibility both to our local government and to the state government to carry out emergency management functions. And I think that really is where my passion for this change comes from, is that recognition that we are a facilitator of action on behalf of those senior elected officials, full stop. And that applies as government generalists, not as individual agency specialists. And I think the closer we are able to align that day-to-day function at the state level, the better off we'll all be at the state and local level. And I think COVID-19 has demonstrated, with our need to make actions on a daily basis, the better we can coordinate those local actions with the intention of the governor during a declared emergency, the better off all Marylanders are.
And Senator, can I add one thing? I know there's a lot of questions about the motivations of this bill, where it came from, who decided to put what in the bill. The bottom line, Jack mentioned the Association of Emergency Managers. They want this bill because they want MEMA to be a forward-facing entity. They think that will streamline communications between the state and the locals. We've all seen with COVID, there was a lot of confusion in the beginning. No one's fault. It's just we weren't coordinated like we should have been. So that's a really, really big issue for our local emergency managers. They just want MEMA to be in a forward-facing role because they think it's going to help with that coordination. And I think that's the bottom line.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. So colleagues, I can talk 911 for hours without taking a breath, but again, there are actually other issues. Senator Ellis, is your hand still up from before? Or do you have another quick question?
Another quick question, Madam Chair.
Please.
And so thank you. This is such an important topic. Emergency management is very important because you emergency managers on this call on this meeting, anytime our citizens are in crisis, we want you to be there for them. Like what's happening in Texas now, it's a disaster. Emergency management is not really working well for them. We don't want that to happen in Maryland. And this is not just a routine bill. What we do here will mean potentially life and death. So I appreciate your time and taking the tough questions that we're asking today. And could you please, Madam Chair, that report from the commission, could you send that to me, please, so I can read it, get background, so I can cast a informed vote?
It would be my pleasure, Senator Ellis. We did send one to every senator in December, but I will hand deliver one to you as soon as our committee is done. Senator Carrozza, just a super quick thing. I got a text from Director Strickland that he shared the bill with the Homeland Security Advisor. So I hope that's helpful information. With that, I see no other questions. I think we ought to complete the hearing on this very important bill. And yes, I'm biased. And so thank you, witnesses. Thank you all. And we are going to shift to, thank you, Chief. Enjoy the rest of your vacation. We're going to shift now to Senator Rosa Pepp, Senate Bill 361, Public-Private Partnerships Process and Oversight. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you very, very much. Nice to be back with you all. I'm going to be fairly brief. This is a pretty detailed bill, but I know your time is limited. Let me give you the big picture, and then we got a couple of witnesses. Big picture is, I've been a big supporter of public-private partnerships in a variety of contexts for transportation, for school buildings, in a variety of areas, and we've had some great successes in Maryland. We've also had some problems, and those of us in the Washington area are most aware of them in terms of the problems we've had with the Purple Line. The good news is that we're overcoming those problems. The Purple Line is going to be running within a couple of years, and it's going to be terrific. But this bill basically addresses the need to have a little more oversight, a little more clarity. We passed the initial PPP law, focused on transportation, but not only transportation in 2013. We've learned things since then, including our experience with the Purple Line. So basically what this bill does is that a whole series of provisions to provide more oversight, to provide more thoughtful decision-making, to provide more ability to correct problems when they come along. That's really what the bill does. The fiscal note lays out all the details. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm sure our witnesses would be happy to answer questions as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Rosa Pepp. Thank you for this legislation. And you have a top-notch bunch of witnesses. Leading off is going to be our wonderful treasurer, Nancy Kopp, followed by Danielle Glaros, Prince George's County Council member, followed by my own council member, the wonderful Mark Pershela, and then Barbara Sofel, Citizens Against Beltway Expansion. So great witnesses. Madam Treasurer, welcome to EHE. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I will be very brief. I am here because in the past couple of years, issues have come up regarding state debt and the relationship between P3s and state debt. And we did work with the sponsors in both the House and the Senate, Senator Rosa Pepp, and want to report that the amendments, which I believe Senator Rosa Pepp is proposing, in fact, take care of a small issue that we had regarding rating agencies versus financial advisors. And with that correction, the State Treasurer's Office is fully respectful of the bill and the committee's action on it. As you know, I personally have been involved in these P3 issues. This is, however, not Nancy Kopp, but the State Treasurer And I do want to thank the senator for working with us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. Councilmember Glaros, welcome to Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs.
Thank you, Senator Kagan. Happy to be here, and thank you for the committee for having me. I also try to keep my comments pretty quick. I can't get any better than Nancy Kopp and her comments. As was mentioned, I'm County Councilmember Danielle Glaros from Prince George's County. So I'm actually here speaking on behalf of myself as the District 3 representative, but also on the Prince George's County Council that has taken a supportive position on this legislation. And it's a fairly easy one for us to support. As many people know, we are experiencing the Purple Line construction project, the delays that have happened with that P3 partnership. We fully believe that as we move forward with P3 partnerships here in Prince George's County and across the state, that we really want to make sure that we have the oversight and the management in place. These are complex projects with a lot of steps to it, and it's really important to have the oversight involved. And in fact, I'm pretty convinced that if we had some of this in place, some of the delays that we're seeing with the Purple Line that really are going to push out this project by 2 years, which is not inconsequential to a community under construction, would have been avoided. In Prince George's County, we are paving the way with actually P3 with school construction. We have set up a management oversight as part of our process, believing once again that it's a best practice as we move forward with public-private partnerships. So with that, I'm just going to thank the sponsor, Senator Jim Rosapep, for supporting this bill, and I appreciate the committee considering an approval for this legislation to move forward. And thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Glaros. Rockville Council Member Mark Prisciello, longtime leader on this issue. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Kagan, Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify with the unanimous support of the Rockville City Council and Mayor in support of SB 361. We thank Senator Rosapep for his leadership in bringing this bill forward. While SB 361 would not impact the current I-270 and I-495 P3 projects, Rockville's experience with the current P3 has brought to our attention numerous and serious flaws. For example, this massive public-private partnership is totally in the hands of the Board of Public Works, a 3-member body, and the General Assembly has had little or no effective input. Further, there have been issues with transparency, including the recent information that the state taxpayers are already on the hook for millions of dollars if this project is delayed or canceled. The city of Rockville is the municipality most impacted by the I-270 and I-495 P3 project, yet we were blindsided when the announcement was made. Additionally, only recently has the city been included in discussions and information. Therefore, Rockville endorses provisions such as the establishment of a public-private oversight review board that would review any P3 over a certain large threshold, the explicit involvement of legislative budget committees, the several provisions that provide for transparency and clarity of process, and we request that a provision be added that would require the state to include municipalities that are directly impacted by a P3 as a partner in the process. SB 361 makes substantial improvements to the state's inadequate P3 process. It creates safeguards that will protect taxpayers and provides the public with the opportunity to understand the real impacts of a large-scale P3. We urge this committee to provide SB 361 with a favorable report and quickly advance it to the Senate floor for a vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Prisciello. Good to have you here. The fourth witness, before there are questions, Barbara Sofel. Very nice to see you. Welcome.
Nice to see you, and you got my name right. Thank you.
Yes.
Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee. I'm Barbara Sofel, co-chair of Citizens Against Beltway Expansion. Thank you for allowing us to share our strong support for Senate Bill 361. As others have noted, the experience of the Purple Line, but also the plan to add toll lanes to I-495 and I-270 demonstrate the need for the P3 process. With respect to the Purple Line, the withdrawal of contractors and the $250 million in added costs made clear that the existing process does not protect taxpayers from the risks of public-private partnerships. The establishment of a review board under SB 361 would provide the General Assembly with needed oversight of future projects. The requirement for a risk analysis and independent credit assessment would protect taxpayers. The non-compete clause would prohibit developers from blocking transportation projects sponsored by local governments. And SB 361 would also require that the environmental review process be completed before a P3 project is put out to bid. The governor's project to widen I-495 and I-270 demonstrate the need for that. MDOT will ask the Board of Public Works to approve the first contract for this P3 in April or May, months before the environmental impact statement is available. There were many deficiencies in the draft environmental impact statement, which must be addressed in the final EIS. For example, the draft EIS failed to account for the cost of stormwater mitigation. It failed to assess the impact on environmental justice communities. Yet the 495 I-270 project is being moved forward before the many deficiencies are addressed. SB 361 would ensure that policymakers and the public understand the fiscal, environmental, and social impacts of a future P3 before any contracts are approved. This is a much needed correction to the P3 process, and we urge the committee to report the bill favorably. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barb. Ms. Stoffel, sorry. We have questions from Senator Patterson, followed by Senator Ellis. Senator Patterson, please unmute, go for it.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And let me just say hello to my former council member, Councilmember McLaren. Good to see you. Just a quick question for the council member there. This oversight board that you made reference to, is it independently for the county council, or is it in partnership with the school system? I'm trying to figure out if it's one standalone, and I certainly support a strong oversight process here. And if it's anything we need most is strong checks and balances. We want to make sure that we are monitoring the taxpayers' dollars. So talk to them a little bit about whether or not this is strictly oversight committee that rests with the county council, or is it inclusive of the whole county with the school system?
Thank you, Senator Patterson. The one that is in Prince George's County includes all the different partners involved in the P3 partnership, so it's not just the county council. Actually, I think what's interesting about the one that Senator Rosapep is proposing and others is it also has a few other pieces. Our P3 is much smaller in scale than, frankly, the P3s that are being done at the state. But I think what you're hearing from all of us is the importance of management and oversight, because these are huge projects that have real consequences for the taxpayers and the communities that are impacted by them.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Senator Patterson. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you, witnesses, and Senator Rosapep for bringing this bill. And so, in my trying to have that process thinking in my brain to say, with this bill, who would be the final authority to authorize a P3?
That's actually a good question. It's a very good question. At the end of the day, it would be the state. The reviews that take place would be reviews that take place. So I think the final authority would not be different, but they'd have different criteria. For example, they'd have to have done the environmental impact statement before they make a decision. So it sort of puts in procedural safeguards. But the essential structure of, if it's a state project, the state makes a decision.
Yes. So okay, that's. I want to get a little deeper, and I'm not sure if. So, and I'm looking at the summary for the bill. It talks about the Legislative Policy Committee, going over agreements. It talks about the Board of Public Works and certain prohibitions. And so I'm trying to see, right now it's the Board of Public Works. So under this review, it seems like we're changing the authority for these projects. And I'm not sure if I can really get a specific answer as far as.
Well, I don't think it takes the Board of Public Works out of it. So I'm happy to look at that in detail happy to clarify that language.
Yeah, under the summary, it says requiring certain agreements to be submitted to the Legislative Policy Committee.
Yeah, well, that's another piece of oversight. It's basically a lot of areas in which we say that information has to be submitted to the legislature, sometimes to the Legislative Policy Committee, sometimes to standing committees.
Okay.
That's pretty typical.
And then there's a prohibition of the Board of Public Works on the circumstance when designate a public-private partnership. There's a prohibition there.
It's a prohibition under certain circumstances.
Okay.
Are you good, Senator Ellis?
No. I mean, are we creating an endless loop here of bureaucratic?
No, we're not creating an endless loop of bureaucracy. Absolutely not, Senator.
Okay.
We're creating an ended loop of oversight. And so we're creating a system with more checks and balances. And I get the argument, and it very well could be that you may conclude, others may conclude that there's too many checks and balances in this bill. But the reason we brought it forward is our experience with P3s so far, at least my view of it is, I'll just speak for myself, is that we haven't had enough checks and balances. But that's the decision your committee's going to have to weigh.
Yeah, I understand that. And so what we're looking at is, I would love to have more say as General Assembly in these projects. Right now in my district, there's a great need for transit relief.
Really?
Like
I had no idea, Senator. I had no idea.
It's like as the representative in the Senate, folks say, hey, you have no say. We can't do this, General Assembly. So I'm for the oversight. I'm for us being involved in this process. But I just need to know that when we vote on this, we're actually making it stronger and not making it more diffuse, and no one is responsible for what is or is not getting done. So that's my
Senator, I totally agree with you. And that's the balance here. And so that's why I'd love you personally, as well as every other member of the committee, is dig into the details of this. And you have amendments you want to propose to make the balance better. I'm totally open to that.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. I see no other hands, in which case that will complete the testimony on Senate Bill 360.
Madam Vice Chair, let me, before they leave, thank the Treasurer and the Councilwoman from Prince George's County, two great friends and people who do a yeoman's job in their respective positions. As Treasurer, as a Councilwoman, our districts overlap, and Ms. Glarus does a great job. And Ms. Kopp, besides being Treasurer, also sits on the Climate Commission and is a great contributor and a voice of reason. So thank all of you for testifying.
So, Mr. Chairman, I've got to give the shout out then to my council member, Mark Pershing, who represents Rockville magnificently.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to Senate Bill 564, Senator Griffith. She is with us. The first bill is Procurement Improvement Council and the Council for Procurement of Health, Education, Social Services. There is only one person. It's Senator Griffith, followed by Terry Spigner. And then we will go to Senator Griffith's other bill with some other familiar people. So let's start with 564. Senator Griffith, welcome to the committee. You need to unmute, Senator. You need to unmute.
That was probably the best introduction that I've given this session, and nobody heard it. It was phenomenal. Let me try that again. This is going to be a presentation that is wrought with apologies. So let me just state that from the offset. I want to certainly thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, and all of the members of the committee. I have two bills that I'm excited to present this afternoon. I'll start with the first one that the chairman introduced, which is Senate Bill 564. And Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, I apologize. In my testimony, it wrongfully identifies the names of the chair and vice chair. So I know folks on this committee read things carefully, so I wanted to just acknowledge that I do know what committee I'm in and apologize for that. Senate Bill 564 is a bill that really was brought to my attention. I was named to a procurement council for health, education, and social services earlier this year by President Ferguson. And at the first meeting I attended, the group was having conversations about merging with the state's Procurement Improvement Council. Now, I didn't know a lot about the group because it was my first meeting. So I was listening to the conversation and listening to the members. And then I remembered a bill that I introduced last session that this committee, with its wisdom, passed to the full chamber and we sent over to the House. But because of the session ending early, that bill, which was a minority business commission, never came to fruition. And so I'm sitting in this room and they're talking about merging these commissions and that are all going to deal with procurement issues. And I started talking with the folks in the room and the bill drafters and my colleagues on the House side who was also in that group. We talked to Senator Kagan and a couple of delegates, and basically the product of that work, along with the work of the president's work group on equity and inclusion, is what brings Senate Bill 564 to you today. We heard from the secretary, from the folks at DGS and from the Office on Procurement that they were going to meeting after meeting every month and talking about the same topics again and again. And I became concerned after reviewing some of the reports. It seemed each of the groups were talking about minority business issues. Now, I'm going to talk about minority business a little bit more when I introduce the next bill, but I'll keep to Senate Bill 564 to let you know the bill actually does three things. One, it alters the duties and membership of the state's Procurement Improvement Council. When I say membership, the previous membership of the Procurement Council were all gubernatorial appointees. The bill that you have before you will allow appointees from the presiding officers as well as the governor. It also allows that requires that at least 3 of the members of the Procurement Improvement Council be representatives of the minority business community. By doing this, this took away the need to develop yet another commission that our cabinet secretaries were having to attend, but also allowed people to have a seat at the table, or as I like to say, for those of you that have seen Hamilton, to have some people in the room where it happens, where decisions are made, representing these issues. The second thing that the bill seeks to do is streamline communications between units of government. You all know in our government, our state is very proud of the e-Maryland marketplace that we're implementing, but we're not using the Procurement Improvement Council as much as we could as a forum to advance that, to make sure, again, back to my data, that we're collecting the right data and getting the information that we need to advance the work of the state and engage as many businesses in wealth creation opportunities as they do business with us. The third thing that the bill does, and I mentioned this in another way, is it basically removes the need for the Procurement Council on Health, Education, and Social Services by merging some of the members from that council to the Procurement Improvement Council. I've worked extensively with the Procurement Office, Department of General Service, and others. And the e-Maryland marketplace, believe it or not, came from a bill that Delegate Nick Charles passed out of the House last session. And so we basically, through this bill, tried to take care of a number of issues related to procurement that will allow minority businesses to have a seat at the table, allow the Procurement Council to use the e-Maryland marketplace and those meetings as a forum to use that data to advance our work, and to streamline the number of meetings our cabinet secretaries and others will attend. So that, and I said I was going to be apologizing. This is my second one. Terry Spigner, who is a strong business owner in Prince George's County. We thought he didn't get signed up, so I actually apologized to him last night and told him I didn't think he got signed up. And so here we are now, and he could have been in and we didn't know it, so that's on me as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm available for any questions anyone might have on Senate Bill 564.
Okay, committee, if you have questions for the sponsor, Senator Griffith, now is the time. Senator Washington.
Hello. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Senator Griff, for bringing this bill. Actually, I've been listening to a lot of these bills, and it's particularly a couple of the procurement issues and the focus on the subgroup underneath the Secretary of General Services and the Chief Procurement Officer. And in fact, I was just thinking about the veterans bill. It's like this needs to be elevated and should be, you know, the responsibility of the Chief Procurement Officer, not ghettoized into the smaller space. So I have to say, and there's going to be, isn't that so, at the end of this, that this really is a very elegant way, I think, to address a lot of what we're looking at and a lot of bills that we're looking at. And so can I ask then, is the placement of the Chief Procurement Officer specifically to address these issues, was that your contemplation, that you wanted the highest ranking person to have the responsibility for achieving veterans goals, for achieving women minority participation goals, for achieving small business goals, for achieving minority? Was that the thinking of this?
Yes, Senator, I met you in the House, but what I would say is I think that where you're headed is probably better addressed by the next bill that I will talk about as well, or the two bills working in partnership, I think. But this commission or this council is led by the state's procurement officer. Yes.
Okay, so this is a council that's consolidating two separate ones.
Correct.
Putting them as a direct responsibility under the person that is in charge of procurement for the entire state. Is that correct?
Correct. And adding minority membership. Yes.
Of course, of course. And then just one other question, Senator. There was, okay, no, it's on the other bill. Okay, I'll wait for the next one.
We'll go to Senator Patterson.
Yeah.
Please unmute Senator Patterson.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is also related to enforcement, but I think it might be better that I hold it until we get to 649 and address it at that point. Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions and the bill with a little more debate and controversy will come up now. We're going to move to 649. Procurement Department of General Services, MBE Program Compliance Officer. We have Senator Griffith, followed by Senator Harrington, former senator, but always a senator, Harrington, who served on EHE, Gail Bassett, and then Darrell Carrington. Senator Griffith, sponsor, please.
Thank you again. Good afternoon. Committee, for the record, I am Melanie Griffith, Senator from Central and Southern Prince George's County. I'm pleased to present to you Senate Bill 649. And now I have to tell you, the bill that you have before you is not exactly the intent of the sponsor. And so what I will say by way of background first is we all know that racial disparities in achieving wealth are being increasingly recognized as building, barriers to long-term financial health in the minority communities. We know right now, because the state does a disparities study, and I tried to read it, it's 481 pages long, including charts and graphs. And, Senators Patterson and Ellis served with me on the work group, and we did a deep dive through a lot of reports from boards and commissions and work groups across the country, attempting to get our arms around minority business issues. We know that Maryland has since 1978 had a minority business enterprise program. We've established goals, and we've attempted to, through our Office of Small Minority, the Governor's Office on Small Minority Women-Owned Businesses, we've collected data and tried to measure. And quite honestly, I looked at the fiscal note from my MBE bill last session, and we had participation at 6% for one agency, 4.6% for another, some as low as 0.9% minority participation. The average at the state level in 2019 was about 15%. I think it's 17% now for minority business participation. That's just with state procurement. And so our work group spent time this summer looking at solutions. And what we decided is that there needed to be an individual, and Senator Washington was kind of headed this way in her question, I believe. There needed to be a point of contact, someone who is accountable for making sure that the state is advancing towards its goals, not just collecting and informing after the fact where the waivers were called upon. And we need to do those things. We need to know where we're succeeding and where we're utilizing minority businesses. We also read earlier this summer, I'm sure some of you all saw the article that I did about some hiccups in our procurement. We had one agency where one of the procurement officers actually gave over 125 contracts in the amount of $15,000, which he was allowed to approve, to one vendor. And those were not competed for. Now, of course, the state auditors caught that and the person is being held accountable. But when I read that article, I thought, gee, it's good that they have small contracts, because then small new businesses, minority businesses, would have a chance to participate in state procurement, but not if those things never get put out into the street. If they're never legitimately available for minority or small women-owned businesses to bid on, then we don't have a chance to start building those kinds of relationships with our agencies and building the kinds of businesses we want to have in our state. And so as I got the bill back and, looked at what the bill drafters heard me say, and I see why they drafted it the way they did. I'm not faulting them at all, because they have the unenviable task of hearing ideas that come from, decades of work and trying to synthesize it into a piece of legislation. So the bill that you have before you is actually the creation of a position that kind of already exists. And if you look at the fiscal note, you'll see, and one of the witnesses that provided written testimony, I think it might have been the DGS, actually said the bill is duplicative in the way that it is introduced. I want to acknowledge that and say that wasn't my intent. So I met this week or last week with the procurement office and DGS and the governor's office on small businesses. I've talked to some business owners around Prince George's and across the state. And what I realized is what we really need is an MBE czar, somebody that's able to do that deep dive into the reports, into the information, be the point of contact, advise the procurement special secretary or director of procurement, advise DGS. We have procurement review groups in every agency and procurement officers, but there is not one single person. So sometimes it's whose responsibility is it? And so what I would like to do, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, is work with Department of Legislative Services to try to get the bill amended in a form that provides for the state of Maryland a MBE czar, for lack of a better description, so that we stop having all these pieces and all these different agencies with no connect. That person can then work with the council that we've just reconstructed, should you all pass the bill. And hopefully that will streamline the MBE process for state procurement. So with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my testimony and explanation of why you all's faces may have wrinkled up when you read the bill, the fiscal note, and other testimony. What I described is not what I got, or what I meant is not what is before you.
Senator, if you can wait, we'll hold questions till your panel is done.
Happy to.
David Harrington, welcome back, Mr. Harrington. Unmute, David.
Mr. Chairman, good to see you as always. And, this was my old committee. And I think looking at the all the members of the committee, I think the only one that was on the committee when I was there was you.
Senator Riley is
you're not necessarily aging me, David.
So, no, it's good to be, as I always say, it's good to be back home. And to Vice Chair Kagan, always good to see you as well. And to all of you, thank you for your work that you're doing during these difficult times. To Senator Griffin, thank you for putting in this bill and having a conversation on how we can create more clarity within the MBE program, and certainly delighted to be participating in this. Again, my name is David Harrington. As the chair mentioned, once a senator, always a senator, but in this role, I'm President and CEO of the Prince George's Chamber of Commerce. And I know you've got a lot of stuff you got to do. I was there, and so I would just make 4 points about this. The general point is that obviously with the numbers that Senator Griffin put out, there's a need to have some mechanism where we can judge equity and look at wealth creation within the state and within businesses. And I certainly support that, and that's something that the Chamber, in fact, our byline at the Chamber is that we are the voice of wealth creation. And I think that this is in line to sort of begin to deal with equity issues and wealth creation. When I was in the Senate, I did put in a bill that, and I think Senator Griffin would appreciate this, I put in a bill that began to look at then identify how many contracts were given out to MBEs and who were they, not so much identifying them, but looking at then who was getting then those dollars, because you can have more signups in MBEs, but if the dollars don't match up to signups, then there's still a problem. And I think that Senator Griffin aptly pointed that out. The last thing I would say is that what this bill does is add a little bit more transparency. So the fact that there needs to be policy remedies, then what this bill would inform you of what those policy remedies need to happen. And looking at some of the notes of this and what Senator Griffin put out, the disparity between what we see in terms of the intent and then and the practice, there's about a 12% disparity, at least in that. And so how do we then begin to close that 12% disparity? I think that one major step would be to have someone who's an advocate for minority businesses who is in place in the Senate that can inform you in a way of making any sort of policy adjustments. So with that, I will conclude my remarks, Mr. Chairman. I got to get used to calling you Mr. Chairman, but offline, I'll call you Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Let's go to Ms. Bassett, please. Gail Bassett, TCE Incorporated.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today in support of Senate Bill 649. Senator Griffin, I want to thank you for your unwavering support for minority business enterprises. For the record, my name is Gail Bassett, and I'm the owner of a certified MBE business in the state, and I am the former secretary of the Department of General Services. And as I give my testimony today for Senate Bill 649, I would also like to add my support to Senate Bill 564. So establishing a chief MBE compliance officer, or as Senator Griffin so eloquently said, the czar within the Office of State Procurement to oversee the enforcement of MBE goals will improve transparency around how MBE goal percentages are determined that are placed on certain state contracts, and around MBE waivers that are granted to prime contractors who contend for one reason or the other that they are unable to achieve the MBE subcontracting goals. And so requiring this compliance officer to, or chief MBE compliance officer to document and report a summary of reasons given by the Procurement Review Group Committee. And this group makes recommendations and determine the MBE goal percentages that are placed on state contracts, and also reasons that have been submitted by prime contractors for each MBE waiver. Will provide the necessary information to understand and examine the circumstances surrounding these decisions. Now, this document will serve as a valuable tool that will identify gaps in MBE outreach approaches and practices in an effort to create effective solutions that will maximize the participation of MBEs on state contracts, reduce the number of waivers that are approved and submitted, and subsequently increase the opportunity for the state to achieve its MBE goals. For the last 3 fiscal years, the 29% MBE goal attainment has been declining, and there is no documented data that explains why the goals decline each year. So in order for the NDE program to fulfill its mission and purpose of ensuring the inclusion and participation of NDEs on state contracts, there must be accountability at every level and every step of the procurement and contracting process. So for these reasons, I ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 649. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bassett. Darrell Carrington. I saw him earlier. Are you still here, Mr. Carrington? If not, we'll open up the questions. Senator Patterson. You need to unmute, Senator Patterson.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Griffin, for bringing this bill forward. We did indeed spend a lot of time talking about this in our work group that was appointed by the president. I guess I want to feel excited here, but I'm not sure I can because I've experienced and seen so many disappointment in terms of we got a great MBE program. We're doing all these wonderful things, but yet I'm hearing now that the numbers are going in the wrong direction. And you know, we are not to misinterpret this. This is a major undertaking, and I think to just be talking about a czar would not be sufficient enough, in my opinion, to do what we would hope that would take place on relative to MBE. So I hope at some point we can think about maybe a unit or a staff of people who would monitor the progress or lack of progress as it relates to the MBE program. I do want to, again, though, give credit to the chair of our committee, Senator Griffin. She fought hard. I see she got two good bills here, and I'm happy to tell her right now that I'm going to do everything I can on this side to make sure we get these bills out of our committee. But there's just so much that needs to be done when it comes to MBEs. But the first thing, you got to have an agency head that's committed. Now, I'm not so sure how this reporting structure would be here. You know, you can have a czar, but if you got somebody at the top that's not open to the progress and the long range goals of the MBE program, I mean, you're probably not going to stay there very long, and you're not going to be able to produce very much in terms of a successful program. So I'm excited, but caution that we're not just sitting here today talking about something that should have been taken care of like 20 years ago. How do we monitor MBE program? How do we count people? We don't even know how we count. Some of the agencies females twice, or they leave it up to the person they're talking to as to how they want to be recorded in a report. So I'm happy to see it here, but I have to admit I have some reservation. Thank you very much.
Isn't
Thank
that
you.
so? Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could respond, I do want to say
Well,
that.
Senator, let me have Senator Ellis, and then I want to have Senator Carrington. I will give you a full chance to respond.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your tireless work, Senator Griffith. We spend late spring, summer, fall into winter working really on this work group for the President's work group on equity and inclusion. And I appreciate your work. And I just want to say, I share the concerns of Senator Patterson, 100%, more studies and recommendations. And I have a question for Ms. Bissett. She talked about this position being able to report and recommend. What would someone in a position of reporting and recommending do to improve the compliance we have, in your opinion?
Thank you, Senator. Someone in that position will have the authority to take action. And, you know, when I was the secretary at Department of General Services as a leader, and I'm not sure if the goals increased or not, I believe that we did have a degree or so of increase. but it starts with the leadership. And so in this position, this officer will have the authority to make changes. And there are several opportunities and initiatives that can be taken to improve the participation of NBEs. When I was secretary, I was the secretary that started the, now it's an annual event, the Business and Summit event that takes place with Maryland Department of General Services and MDOT are partners, where we bring minority vendors and procurement officers and program managers in to discuss opportunities and requirements before they hit or posted as solicitations. And then from that, as a follow-on from there, we conducted bi-monthly information sessions where the program managers and the contracting officers would talk about these requirements that were coming up with a group of NBEs in those specific areas. So to answer your question, there are initiatives that can take place that can move the needle further, but we do have to have the data and we have to examine the data. And this position, this officer will be a part of the procurement review group also. And that's the group that make the determinations.
Thank you. I'll go back to you, Senator Griffith, or I can defer to Mr. Carrington. Your call. Need to unmute.
Wait, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to wait.
Okay, Mr. Carrington.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's so great to see you all, and I miss being in your office and the like. Also great to see my senators from Prince George's County, and also Senator Kagan. I see you smiling. It's just a real pleasure. And I'm sorry for taking so much of your time to just, for my greetings. But this is an absolutely outstanding bill that Senator Griffith and others have worked on. As a small business owner in Maryland and working with a lot of other MBEs, one of the chief complaints that we have is just not having information as to why waivers were given, what happened to this particular bid. Having someone as a go-to person, someone that has responsibilities for these areas is very important. And of course, I'd like to also echo Senator Patterson's concerns. I mean, yes, we have an MBE program. We've been working to try to make it better, and I think all of you have been working very diligently to do just that. I think this is a small step forward, a great step with a lot of work that went into it to move forward. And I just want to applaud you all for your efforts, and I'd like to offer my support as I can. And we're just really grateful that we have so much attention paid to the MBE program in the state of Maryland and trying to make sure that it lives up to its goals and objectives. So thank you all for your time, and I appreciate a favorable report.
Thank you. Back to you, Senator Griffith. I apologize for cutting you off. I want to get through this.
Oh, no problem at all. Basically, Mr. Chairman, I really wanted to respond to Senator Patterson, Senator Ellis, and others who've raised concerns and say, I share your concerns. Again, we had a 481-page disparities report. We made, as a work group, 27 recommendations related to wealth and financial opportunities. At the end of the day, if there was an easy solution, Maryland would have already done it. What we seek to do through this bill is put someone in the driver's seat. You see, we have the governor's office, and if you look at the fiscal note, you'll see we have the minority small bit, we have a compliance program through the governor's office on small minority woman-owned business. We have MBE goals. We have all of the tools in place, but we don't have someone driving their completion. We have people collecting on how we're doing and maybe making recommendations, but we actually need someone to drive us towards eradicating some of the barriers between minority businesses and participating in the state. If you look, there's so much information about how, positions, businesses from the same jurisdiction, all things being equal, minority businesses own less, they get less access to capital. There are so many areas that we need to impact. But if we don't have one person on deck that we can go to that is responsible for this, that is a decision maker and a driver, not a reactor and a reporter, That's what we're seeking to accomplish through this bill.
Thank you, Senator. That concludes the hearing on this legislation. Committee, we have 5 more bills and we have a voting session. These are all very important bills. Let's just try to be succinct in our questions and as penetrating as necessary, but we do have some more work to do. With that, we're going to go to Senator Hayes. Are you with us, Senator Hayes? Yes.
Sir, Mr. Chair.
Senate Bill 635, Minority Business Enterprise Calculation of Participation Rates, Exemption of Procurements from Correctional Enterprises. We'll start off with Senator Hayes, then Robert Dashiell, followed by Scott Phillip.
All right, good afternoon,
Senator
Penske, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. I'm honored to speak with you today alongside my friend Robert Dashiell in support of Senate Bill 635 in conjunction also with others who are supporting this bill today. Senate Bill 635 seeks to repeal an unjust exemption to minority business enterprise law by amending the State Finance and Procurement Code. Current MBE law requires state agencies to make every effort to achieve an overall minimum goal of 29% of the total dollar value of their procurement contracts directly or indirectly from certified MBE firms. However, state procurement units are permitted to exclude the total dollar value of procurement contracts with Maryland Correctional Enterprise, MCE, when calculating their MBE goal. MCE, the state's legally mandated preferred provider, is a prison labor organization that pays their laborers as little as 17 cents an hour. Senate Bill 635 will require the inclusion of MCE contracts in these calculations. The MBE program was created in 1978 to help provide equitable opportunities for minority-owned businesses to rectify decades of discrimination that resulted in certain groups being socially and economically disadvantaged. Prior to each reauthorization, the Maryland's MBE program, the state concludes a disparity study to determine whether there is continued evidence that MBEs are underutilized in state contracting. Unfortunately, the disparity study concluded prior to the most recent authorization of the Maryland MBE program found ongoing large and statistically significant disparities in the use of MBEs by the state compared to the availability in the marketplace. For example, African Americans owned construction businesses were paid just 5.1% of state construction contract dollars, despite making up 10.3% of the construction sector. Non-minority woman-owned construction businesses were paid just 7.5% of the state construction contract dollars, despite making up 13.7% of the construction sector. Relevant to this discussion is the long and painful history of the American criminal justice system, a system that has victimized and imprisoned generations of our minorities and exploited dirt cheap prison labor to rake in untold profits. This victimization and exploitation continues to this day. There is a sick irony in this system. The state claims a commitment to ensuring opportunity for minority-owned businesses throughout its MBE program, but then designate MCE as a preferred provider and exempts any MCE contracts from counting towards its MBE goal. Finally, minority-owned businesses have disproportionately been impacted by the pandemic as compared to non-minority-owned businesses. They have faced higher rates of closures, sharper declines in cash balances, and more difficulty in accessing vital PPP funds. It is more important now than ever for Maryland to reaffirm its commitment to ensuring equity for minority-owned businesses. However, we cannot do this if we continue to undercut the pledge of equitable and minority-owned businesses. if I would encourage this committee to visit at some point the MCE website, and it clearly articulates the travesty of this organization, right? And I'll just read one paragraph from their website that gives the background of how this organization was created. It says prison industry programs in Maryland have been authorized since the 1916 and the United States since the 19th century. Poor prison work conditions, inmate exploitations, and the advent of the Depression caused Congress to enact legislation making the transport of prison-made goods and interstate commerce a federal criminal offense. And it goes on to say that as a result of the federal government banning this type of exploitation nationally, the state of Maryland came up with a great idea to adapt it locally. And not only did they adopt it locally, they used it as an opportunity for state agencies to have this be a preferred vendor in their state, forcing them to buy products from there. If you look at the annual reports of this organization and the atrocity and rate of pay that it paid individuals, you would be astonished. We just had a committee hearing in finance not too long ago, and the disparities are great. I pulled the 990s and all the public information available with all of the chief executives for this organization, in addition to the inmates. And so the proponents, the opposition to this bill, and I have the presentation from MCE. And obviously, as not being a member of this committee, I won't have a chance to ask them any questions. But I employ this committee as they come to this committee and talk about the recidivism rates and how they're teaching folks behind bars to reentry. Ask them what is the average sentence of the inmates and ask them to provide for you in writing. I will tell you that if you look at the number of prisoners that are in their system, most of them serving life sentences, 30, 40 years. There's no chance that these individuals will be back out on the streets anytime soon. And so we are legalizing low and exploiting the prison workforce in our city at the expense of minority-owned businesses. If you look at their annual report that's on their website, MCE generated $55 million last year with a net income of $31 million. Imagine the impact that's taken away from our small and minority businesses. The speaker behind me will, who I have great deal of respect for, Rob DeShields, has worked in this area. Scott Phillips as well has worked in this area for a very long time. And even Robert yesterday challenged me that I'm not going further enough and providing greater opportunities for MCEs, and we should, look at other opportunities. But, researching the history of this organization and what they have been doing to our state has propelled me to introduce this legislation. But I look forward to additional testimony today. And Madam Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, and members of EHE, I urge a favorable report that we must act with the most urgency to pass Senate Bill 635. Thank you so much for your attention this afternoon.
Thank you, Senator. Before I go to the other proponents, if committee counsel is listening, what is the operative change in the law? I'm looking at page 2 and see new language in line 26 and 27. That deals with blind industries. Does it, by implication, change the MCE aspect of the bill? I'm a little confused.
You want me to give a shot? I'm gonna let committee counsel because I have.
Let's start with the committee counsel, then
Sure.
You can jump in, Senator.
Okay, so essentially, right now, there are preferences in the law for.
A little louder, April, please.
Sorry. There are preferences in the law for state procurement that essentially makes the Maryland Correctional Services the first sort of preference. And then if they don't offer the supplies or services and Blind Industries does, they're the next. And then I think there's one more, the whatever works program, the Maryland Employment Works program. The way the minority business enterprise goals are calculated right now, you can the procurement units are essentially allowed to ignore all the contracts that they are giving to those sort of prioritized groups and just say out of the pool of contracts that are going to the non-priority groups, what is the percentage of those that are going to minority business enterprises? So this would, it doesn't change the requirement that they prioritize those groups. It just says you now include the contracts going to the correctional enterprises as part of the larger pie that you're looking at when you're trying to determine whether the state has met the percentages for the minority business enterprise goal.
Yeah, I get the intent. I guess we can talk offline. I'm just trying to understand how it's actually done in the bill, but I thank you for your explanation.
And Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right. April did an outstanding job. I had those same questions, and the way the bill drafted, and Charity, who is an awesome bill drafter, was able to articulate the nuance in which he drafted the bill. I was expecting some language to be struck, and we see what current law was there, but the way she drafted it, I had the same question. So thank you, April, for
Thank you. Mr. Dashiell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairman. I'm Robert Dashiell. I'm a procurement lawyer. I was happy to respond to Senator Hayes when he asked me to look at this. I think he did it. I think he asked me because he knows I was around in 1978 and was one of the people who participated in assisting drafting, which I think was House Bill 64, if I recall. He also knows that I've written MBE programs, not just in Maryland, but around the country. I also had some difficulty understanding the proposed legislation, but I'm going to boil it down to at least the way that what I think the simple intent is. It simply means that agencies can no longer reduce the amount that they are required to seek to achieve in minority participation by counting the dollar value of contracts not awarded to minority companies. It's really just that simple. It's not intended to undermine the state's desire to contract with Maryland Correctional Services, and back in my day, it was called State Use Industries. It's not intended to undermine the state's desire to contract with Blind Industries or Maryland Works or any of those programs. It simply says you cannot count the dollars that you award to those companies as though there were contracts awarded to minority business enterprises, which has a very special definition. As you see in my submission, and I apologize for perhaps some typographical errors. It was kind of rushed, but as you see, the statute contains some very specific definitions over what a minority business is. It has a very specific definition of what a socially and economically disadvantaged business is. And these organizations, that is the Maryland Correctional Services, the Blind Industries, and Maryland Works, simply are not socially and economically disadvantaged businesses, and therefore cannot be minority businesses either. So the simple purpose of the bill, as I understand it, is simply to say, give whatever preferences you want that are legally permissible to whomever you want, but you cannot count the dollar value of contracts awarded under those preferences toward minority businesses unless the organizations receiving the preference are themselves, in fact, minority businesses. And neither of those organizations are. So I urge your favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dashiell. Mr. Phillips.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Vice Chair. Thank you for the opportunity. For Senator Hayes and Senator Washington, I appreciate seeing you both. Can you hear me clearly, Mr. Chairman?
We can now.
Okay, all right. Once again, I just want to thank the Baltimore delegation as a Baltimore guy, Senator Hayes and Senator Washington. This came to me and
Mr. Phillips.
One of the things that I do, yes.
You are coming in.
Okay, hold on one second. Let me do this.
Would also may help if you turn off your video and just have speaking. It would cut down on the bandwidth.
Yeah, Mr. Phillips, you're frozen now.
Let's try it again.
Mr. Chair, is this better?
So far, let's keep going.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. This is a challenge with Zoom. Every once in a while, we have some delays. My role is my role is as an advocate for minority businesses. I've been doing this for a number of years. I run a minority business program for the city of Baltimore, and I represent minority business individually as a practicing attorney. This is for me, particularly as it relates to manufacturers, which I spend a lot of time with. MCE is a direct competitor to many of our clients. And that is in the areas that they provide furniture or signs and banners, apparel, et cetera. Companies like Edwards and Hill, companies like Citywide Youth, which is in the senator's district, actually provide the same things that MCE provides. Understanding that there was an intent many years ago to provide those services and provide training, we won't debate that. The concern that I have is now we're hitting those same clients with a double whammy. That double whammy is not only does MCE receive the preference, but we're also reducing the requirement for the agency to do business with minority businesses. And that seems to me to be a little unfair and presents a significant advantage to MCE. The senator noted that on its webpage, it mentions a number of things, but one of the things that's also on its web
Phillips, you're freezing.
Is specifically the agency that you could reduce your number that you would be required to provide to MBEs. I thought that was a little, once again, it's interesting that they would put that directly on their webpage. Last year, the senator mentioned that the agency did about $55 million. To put that in real numbers, that means
you're coming in and out.
Somewhere between 16 to 17 million dollars that minority businesses decline to give to minority businesses. I must focus on the denominator and not the numerator. And so I think it's important to put the full procurement number in the denominator and not remove MCE. All of those procurements should be included in the denominator. For those reasons, I really support this legislation. It is, MBEs have a hard enough time as it is, and the agencies are not meeting their number. I don't believe there is one agency last year that met its 29% goal. So that would be my thought.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Senator Washington.
Thank you, Chairman. So Senator, actually Senator Patterson was okay. Senator Hayes, you've buried the lead here. I'm just still sort of stuck. First of all, thank you for bringing this bill. I'm aware of this issue in that at my university and that other universities, they do have some work groups specifically concerned about the mandating, given the history of this entity, that state agencies are required, even if it costs more. This is the other thing. They are required, even if it costs more, to use MCE. So I'm just interested in that and might ask you if you would allow me to put in an amendment to change that from shall to may or something. But I wanted to ask you about, I was looking on the annual report. It does say the $55 million, and it looks, there's all kinds of things, graphic design, sewing, flags. I mean, we have all this equipment right here in our building, laundry services. But then there's this column of inmate employment. Do you know what that means? And, or should I just ask the agency? So one, there's colleagues, there's $55 million that our small veteran women and minority businesses could be competing with, and they can't. I definitely, please page shoot the, or take a picture of if they are telling agencies that they can circumvent our MVE goals by hiring them, I am outraged. This committee, we should be outraged, and that agency should be sanctioned immediately for making recommendations to subvert the policies of the state of Maryland when it comes to women-owned, veteran, minority MVEs. So I just wondered, one, if you knew about what that inmate employment column had to do with, and if there's anything else you think we should know.
No, and I'm not absolutely sure what that column means. I think it's probably
Okay, I'll ask them.
reserved for the agency.
Okay, I'll ask them. Okay. Again, thank you for bringing this. I think at the very least, not having a preference, I'm just sort of stunned right now.
No, absolutely. And I understand that this bill is now a product of the committee, so I welcome whatever.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you, Chairman.
Senator Ellis. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Hayes, for bringing this issue to my attention. I really didn't have a clue. And, with the history of this country, first slavery of African Americans, our labor was exploited for many years, and then Jim Crow and peonage, where the prison system was used to get slave labor. And to see that, from what I understand, this continuing in Maryland, it's a shameful continuation of the shameful history of America. And I will pledge my support to help to end this. As a lot of folks know, the Constitution, US and Maryland, banned slavery except for prisoners. And it's a downright shame that we still have slavery in this country legally, constitutionally. And we have mass incarceration now, where we have over 70% of the prisoners in Maryland are African Americans, my brothers and sisters, and they are not allowed to be out to be working to take care of their families and to be working for 17 cents an hour. It's a downright moral shame on the state. And I just want to say that, we need to look at these things and to really work to help our MBEs to make sure that we can work and take care of families outside of the prison walls. And for the state to be taking advantage of mainly Black people in Maryland like this, and we can still sleep well at night, it's downright insulting to our humanity and human rights violations. And we need to really look at changing these things and attacking these policies one by one to break it down and destroy this policy that's still happening now. So thank you, Senator, for bringing this to our attention. And I pledge my support to listen and to learn and to follow your lead as you take up these issues.
Okay, we can discuss this when it comes to the committee. If you have further questions for this panel, Senator Patterson, do you have a question? You're on mute, sir. I see your hand raised, Senator Patterson. No?
I have no question. I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Simon Ayer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ellis, I consider you a good friend, but that statement you just made, I just wanted to clarify. You said you're equating prison to slavery. So those who have committed murder against our citizens and other acts like that, you consider that slavery?
Yeah, I'm gonna.
I mean, it's a public statement, Mr. Chair.
I understand that it was a personal statement. I don't want to get a debate back and forth.
Well, I would refrain from making those public statements if you're not going to qualify them. I think.
Okay. Well, we can continue that discussion offline. There are obviously differences of opinion. We have a hearing. We have 4 more bills. It was a personal assertion, which you can accept or not accept. You've pointed out that you disagree with it. So, other questions for the panel? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on that legislation. We're moving to Senator Kagan's second bill, We have 4 more to go. This is Procurement Reform 911, Senate Bill 645. She'll be followed by Kevin Canali and Jack Markey.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And colleagues, for the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, and back with another issue related to Next Generation 911. This issue is more complicated and not as clean and clear as the other one. And I will be brief and I only have one witness with me on this, and we are amending the bill significantly. Before I start, I again want to recognize Senator Riley, Senator Jackson, and Delegate Krebs for being wonderful partners. I'm going to hold up 2 pieces of paper that you are not going to be able to read, but you get the concept. This is what happens in virtually any government department or agency when they want to do some procurement. You can see that this is a really long list of steps. There's a lot of oversight. There's a lot of engagement by a lot of different entities. This, which is much easier to read because there are just a lot fewer steps when it comes to 911. Now, I think you guys know how devoted I am to 911, to the women and men who are our public safety sheroes and heroes, to the people who put their lives on the line, to the urgency with which we need to be able to respond to emergencies around the state. Having said that, I also am really devoted to spending taxpayer money wisely, to having transparency, oversight, and accountability. Now, to be clear, I am not in any way casting aspersions, nor do I have any doubt, but that the procurement process for the 911 systems in each of our 24 jurisdictions is being done ethically, morally, and prudently. Despite that, I think it could use more checks and balances. So to be clear, this bill, which is co-sponsored by Senators Riley and Jackson, did not get the blessing of the commission. And the people that I adore, that I get to work with in 911, generally did not support this bill because the current process is working for them. I just don't believe that it's working for the state of Maryland. So through the interim, I probably spent 4 or 5 months talking to dozens of procurement experts, whether that's from the Department of General Services, the Department of Legislative Services, whether it's legislators who have enacted and been on commissions about procurement, whether it was our wonderful state treasurer and her deputy who are just brilliant on procurement issues, national folks. I talked to a lot of people. And what I said is that I think we have a problem. I don't think there's enough transparency and accountability. And on the other hand, we're talking about 911. Don't want to slow things down. Don't want to have a lot of, a million different forms to fill out and bureaucracy that's going to gum up the works. When it's 911, we want to make sure that there's a process that works quickly and efficiently. But I thought there should be something other than the way it works now. Briefly, the way it generally works now is, and the way it worked for just 13 contracts over the course of the past year. So this isn't all contracts. And I'm not talking about paper clips here. I'm talking about $500,000 or more and making sure that there's one more bite at the apple. So this bill I suggested was for contracts of $500,000 or more, have someone at MEMA, a procurement person at the Maryland Emergency Management Agency, if it turns out that the 911 board goes over there, the bill we heard earlier today, or the Department of General Services, have them take a look. Again, we're talking about 13 contracts, not a lot. DGS, the Department of General Services, even said they could do this with existing resources, didn't have to hire anyone new, no big cost, but just one more person looking at it to make sure that the process was clean and clear and transparent, then have it go back with their seal of approval and have it voted on by the 911 board. The current system is basically one county signs off and takes on multiple, potentially millions of dollars, as it did for text to 911, and then all the other counties sign on. And then the 911 board, many members of which are 911 center directors, then get to sign off on something that affects their county. So it just seemed a little too potentially the appearance of self-dealing, a little not transparent and not independent enough. So I brought that proposal. Ultimately, all hell broke loose because people said it's working for us now, don't mess with it. I still believe that we do need a better system. So working with my friends at MACO, and Kevin Canale is here to testify. The Maryland Association of Counties brought an amendment to my attention, which I am bringing to this committee, which is before we try to fix it, they are suggesting that we actually have MEMA or the Department of General Services or someone take a look at it in advance, analyze the 500,000 and above contracts, and let them take a look and see if they think the process is sufficient. They will send a brief memo or report. I'm not looking for a 300-page analysis, leather bound, but they'll do a brief memo, send it to the Next Generation 911 Commission, and we can take a look and see if there are some tweaks or an overhaul that's next year. So basically, Mr. Chairman, this would require something more than a summer work study, more than a work group, but not by us, but basically mandate that we get the facts so that we can decide whether the procurement process for 911 is working. And with that, I will hand it off to the wonderful Kevin Canale, and then happy to take any questions. But again, the bill that you have in front of you is not the bill anymore. So as amended. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Canale, followed by Mr. Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Kevin Canale here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties in support with amendments. And I certainly appreciate Senator Kagan offering this amendment. I'll just say that county procurements for 911 enhancements are already subject to local procurement rules, which by law are open, transparent, and fair. And in many counties, before they enter into these contracts for 911 equipment, the funding must be secured prior to entering contract negotiations with vendors. In other counties, you have to have funding secured before you can even put out an RFP. So the original bill would have had DGS take a look and within 60 days, make a recommendation to the 911 board as to whether or not they should approve these reimbursement requests. And that just created a problem operationally for counties. So I think Senator Kagan laid it out well. This amendment is just saying, we don't think there is a problem, but we're happy to make sure that there isn't. And I think this data will set the path forward for the 911 Commission and for any potential legislation. I think it's a good middle of the road way to handle this. And again, we appreciate the Senator offering the amendment, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mr. Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair. Jack Markey, Frederick County, Maryland, Division of Emergency Management, here on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties Emergency Management Affiliate and the Emergency Communications Committee, or the 911 directors who work closely with us as part of MACO. I deeply appreciate Senator Kagan agreeing to amend the bill. As written, there were concerns about the process flow. 911 in Maryland is a local responsibility of the 24 jurisdictions who operate 911 centers, and assisted and overseen by the Maryland 911 Board. So procurement is an individual transaction done by a county and then brought to the Maryland 911 Board if the project is appropriate for funding by the Maryland 911 Trust Fund. That procurement may be done through an appropriate local government mechanism and is overseen by local elected officials and their procurement regulations county by county. I do understand the need for accountability, oversight, and the encouragement of direct participation, as many of your bills today have, for small minority veteran-owned businesses where and as much as appropriate, and look forward to the opportunity to study whether 911 procurement does need reform in Maryland, and if so, ensure that all the stakeholders are at the table when we set goals and determine what the next step should be. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Markey. Question for this panel. Seeing none, we will go to Mr. Signor, Senator Sidnor, 689, Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs, duty of the Special Secretary. We'll hear from the sponsor, and then we'll hear from Mr. Bazell, Mr. Hannibal, and Stanley Tucker, and then Darrell Carrington. Senator Sidnor, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of Health, Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs. I'm, for the record, Senator Charles Sidnor, here to testify in favor of Senate Bill 689. For those of you who may not know, Senate Bill 689 is derived from the Senate President's Advisory Work Group on Equity and Inclusion, recommendation number 3, which states that strengthening support programming in the Governor's Office of Small Minority and Women Business Affairs for MBEs by establishing a mentoring program in which larger and more established MBEs mentoring smaller and younger MBEs. So what this bill does in essence is just that. It expands the duties of Go SBA to include the establishment of a mentoring program in which firms similar to Mr. Bazell would take on and be able to mentor some startup MBEs and try to get them on the right track. It provides that Go SBA would conduct a feasibility study for providing technical assistance to teach and train those MBEs in how to successfully procure and bid for contracts here with the state of Maryland. It would also provide training, or the duty for the Go SBA to provide training and other educational opportunities for non-minority prime contractors regarding the duties that they have in bringing in MBE contractors. And finally, it would establish an annual awards program to help recognize those localities and those who demonstrate some of the high excellence in MBE support. This bill, it helps to build an institutional framework for continuing education for minority businesses and a network development, which is a natural step to ensuring long-term successful minority businesses. And for those reasons, I would ask that you vote favorably in support of SB 689, and for the committee to understand, just for your knowledge, Mr. Bazell will be the sole person testifying today, and I think you'll find his testimony and to be pretty revealing about the benefit of this type of a program. So with that, I will turn it over.
Mr. Bazell puts you under the spotlight, but it also.
Can you hear me?
Thank you, Mr. Bazell. Please proceed.
You're welcome. Can you all hear me well?
Perfect.
Okay. Definitely. Good afternoon and greetings, Chairman Paul Pinsky and the distinguished members of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee. My name is Dr. Anton Bazell, President and CEO of the Bazell Group. It is my distinct honor and privilege to testify before you today in support of Senate Bill 689. This year, I was honored by the U.S. Small Business Administration as the 2020 Maryland Small Business Person of the Year, as well as the 2020 Suburban Maryland Small Business Person of the Year. That was really as a result of receiving technical assistance, mentoring, and targeted marketing through awards programs and inclusion into small business events. Other achievements for the firm included being named one of the 3 finalists for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Dream Big Small Business of the Year for 2020, as well as being ranked as one of the fastest growing companies in America by Inc. magazine at 137 and the Washington Business Journal Fastest 75 list, where we are ranked as number 10. The connections, networking, technical assistance, and recognition that Bazell established through these programs was invaluable in moving us to become successful in the business world. I started the company as a one-person company in my basement in Bowie, Maryland. We became 8A certified in 2012. Our first federal contract came 7 months later, which is truly lightning speed in the government contracting world, and continued to grow tremendously since that time. We now have offices and staff in New Carrollton, Lanham, Rockville, Maryland, Atlanta, Georgia, and 2 offices in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. We are thrilled to be working across the country and around the globe with now over 200 employees as of April 1st, but it all started in Maryland. According to U.S. Chamber of Commerce, where I'm actually a board member for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, it states that entrepreneurship plays an important role in building wealth in families, communities, and economies, but the opportunity to start and grow a business is not equal for white and Black Americans. For instance, Black Americans are underrepresented amongst entrepreneurs, representing 12% of the U.S. labor force, but only 9.4% of business owners. And they are less likely than white Americans to launch businesses. And when they do, those businesses tend to have lower revenue and fewer employees. I would not be here without the support of similar programs through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as the U.S. Small Business Administration, and the perseverance and vision to leverage that support to grow a company focused on making a difference around the world. That support came through mentoring. John Maxwell once said, one of the greatest values of mentors is the ability to see ahead what others cannot see and to help them navigate a course to their destination. I had the support of various mentors, all Maryland-based companies, who provided technical assistance, training, one-on-one conversations about growing a business, or just surviving in the ever-changing landscape. Today, I receive calls from business owners almost every other day asking for support on how to grow their business. In the state of Maryland, we need to have some increased technical assistance, networking, educational and recognition programs, opportunities for entrepreneurs. And to be honest, other states are providing this support at greater levels than our very own. For instance, when my colleagues in other states receive awards, even those in Virginia and surrounding states, their states acknowledge and publicize their accomplishments through various means. So as I close, I'd like to leave with each of you the following that I recall from growing up in my early days that guided me throughout this journey of starting a business. There's a saying that our young men will see visions and our old men will dream dreams. As I began this journey in 2010 to 2012 in the startup phase, I had a vision that was laid out by my mentors who were so numerous to name along the way that believed that a future was bright if I just followed the path of other successful business owners. The road was not easy. However, now that I'm older and now 10 years into the business, I can now dream those same dreams for others who are coming behind this pathway to growing a successful business. So thank you very much for your time and considering my testimony in supporting the Senate bill. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Vizel. Quite a resume. We're very appreciative of your work. Let's go to Mr. Carrington, and then we'll take questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good to see you all again. And I didn't get a chance to say hello to Senator Riley. I do miss coming to your office as well, sir, and Senator Washington. Again, as much as people may not say it, I do really miss being in the halls. And Dr. Lamb, thank you for all you're doing through this pandemic. Your sacrifice is just amazing. I'm here in support of this great bill that Senator Signer from Baltimore, and hello to you, sir. Thank you for putting this in. I think obviously the introduction was absolutely fantastic from Mr. Vizel, and I can't add anything to that other than as a small business owner and as a person of color, it would be helpful to have someone who has gone through the processes before me, and also from a lens that I have as well. Maybe some of the same challenges and hurdles that I see, or maybe, anxieties and fears I may have about, kicking open another door or whatever, but other people who have done that, it would be, instrumental to my future success to have that type of resource to lean on. Sometimes just to commiserate with. I mean, many times, and I think all of us understand it, we are very unique fields. And sometimes you need someone who has those shared experiences to be able to lean on. So I know you've had a very long day. I won't add to it any further. Thank you so much for your consideration of this. And I hope you all remain safe and healthy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darrell. We have one question, Senator Kagan, Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I am about to violate all rules and risk the wrath of the chairman Mr. Bazell, I have not had the good fortune of having met you before, but can I just say that you are a magnetic speaker, very impressive, and it doesn't surprise me at all that you started in your basement and now have over 200 employees. Wish you all the best, and I hope our paths cross.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Isn't that so, Mr. Chairman?
That
Thank
is so. That concludes the hearing on Senator Sidner's bill.
Thank you.
With Senator Eckert, with just herself presenting, and also Senator West, again with just himself presenting. Have either of them joined us?
Yeah, she's coming, Senator Penske, Senator
Okay,
Eckert.
then would you have Senator West on deck?
Senator West should be joining us as well.
Okay, these will be very brief. Then we'll take a 10-minute break, a personal break, and meet in the committee room.
And she was voting up in B&T.
We can take Senator West first if he shows. Or we can reschedule the hearings.
Reaching out to them again right now.
Okay.
Senator Eckert has just joined.
Okay, Senator Eckert, we're up to 697, your bill on state procurement.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair. Senator Addie Eckert here, and I'm just getting connected. I'm upstairs in the kitchen. We're in the middle of a voting session in B&T, so excuse me. But this bill, I'm here today, Senator Addie Eckert, testimony for 697 state procurement, minority business enterprise program participation by gender or race. And thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. This bill is one of a series of bills that came out of President Ferguson's work group on equity and inclusion. We met throughout the summer every week and did a lot of investigation about what we could do to make some major recommendations. And if you have the opportunity to read the report, I would encourage you to do that. Many of us are carrying pieces of legislation, and I am carrying two. This is one of them. And that would merely change the language in the law regarding minority women-owned businesses for them to be able to report dual ownership status to qualify for the Minority Business Enterprise Program. The current MBE law requires agencies to make efforts to ensure that 29% of the total dollar value of their procurement goes directly or indirectly to businesses that are minority or women-owned. These businesses, however, must choose to either be designated as a minority or to be designated as a minority woman, but they can't designate both. There is underutilization to be able to meet this goal, and it was the group's recommendation that this prohibition hinders the accuracy of the MBE data and does not reflect the true ownerships of the businesses. So we are recommending this bill and would like your favorable passage of it so we can see how that will make a difference in making sure we can recruit and retain more minority women in the MBE program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Eckert. Any questions for Senator Eckert? Or we can let her go back to her voting session. Seeing no questions, Senator Eckert, thank you for your quick response to our call.
Thank you.
Last bill of the day, Senator West. There he is. Senator West, welcome. You're the last one between a personal break of the committee. So you're up if you'd unmute and begin testimony on 703.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. I'm not sure I got any witnesses on this bill. And if I don't, it'll be really brief. So I'm pleased to introduce Senate Bill 703. This bill is the second bill this session that I've had the privilege of introducing, which embodies one of the recommendations of the Senate President's Advisory Work Group on Equity and Inclusion. Senator Griffith chaired this work group, and along with Senators Ellis and Patterson and Eckert, I was one of its 7 members. The work group just issued its report last month. Ever since 1978, Maryland has had a minority business enterprise program to encourage women and minority-owned firms to participate in the state procurement process. Maryland's current MBE statute requires agencies to make every effort to achieve an overall minimum goal of 29% of the total dollar amount of their procurement contracts directly or indirectly from certified MBE firms. The federal government has its own MBE program, overseen by the U.S. Small Business Administration. Currently, businesses must separately qualify as MBEs under both federal and state law. So a business which has successfully navigated the federal statutes and regulations and is qualified as a federal MBE must apply and qualify separately under Maryland's MBE program. This is burdensome to minority and women-owned businesses and deters them from participating in the state procurement process. With that as an introduction, Senate Bill 703 merely requires the State Board of Public Works, which oversees all state procurement, to adopt new procurement regulations that will enable a federal MBE that has been certified under the Federal Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program to become certified as a Maryland MBE without requiring the business to file any additional paperwork other than evidence of its federal certification. Current Maryland law requires a federally certified MBE to not only establish that it has received federal certification, but also to separately and independently establish that it meets the eligibility requirements of the Maryland MBE program. In order to obtain a Maryland MBE certification, an applicant has to fill out a lengthy application form with accompanying documents, undergo an investigation, and be the subject of a deliberate administrative proceeding, and then await an ultimate determination letter. So Senate Bill 703 changes existing law to provide that a federal certification alone will suffice, and an MBE will no longer have to separately establish its eligibility under Maryland law. And with that, I hope that you'll issue this bill a favorable report. I won't take any questions. I see Senator Hester.
Senator Hester, do you have a question?
I do have just a quick question. Are the
sorry.
definitions, we're talking about the application process being onerous, are the definitions the same?
Oh boy, you're getting down to the weeds. I'll check that and get back to you promptly. I don't know the answer to that.
The definition of, because I was thinking about the definition of the small minority.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, the definition of the minority business enterprise is the same in all material respects.
Okay, that was my question.
Worded a little differently, but materially it's the same definition.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Senator West. I apologize, Senator Fry-Hester. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourning this hearing. It is now 4:24. We try for 10 minutes in the committee room. I know it's a long day. If it stretches to 12 or 13, that's okay. So we'll meet in the committee room with masks and all of your files in 10 or 15 minutes.